I'd like to call this District of Clearwater Regular Council meeting on Tuesday, June 17th, 2025 to order. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are fortunate to be gathering together on the unceded territory of the Simpcw people who have been caretakers of this land since time immemorial. Is there any introduction of late items? Seeing none, we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda for on June 17th. Regular council meeting be approved. Councillor Bratton, Councillor Matheson, all those in favor? Carried. Moving on to declaration of conflict of interest or pecuniary interest. Anyone have anything to declare? Moving on, TNRD Director, I see you're here, Mr. Zhao. Please come forward.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Just an update from the Area A and TNRD in general. We've had community meetings in Area A, out of which there was one item. Residents are appreciative of the District of Clearwater's initiative to look into the off-leash dog park. I did notice there was a discussion on social media. There was a person advising others that Birch Island remains an option for people to bring their dogs for off-leashing. So I've reached out to that individual to kind of correct that information. Feel free to share that with your communities as well, that the Birch Island Community Park is not an off-leash dog park. Yeah, thank you. And then just wanted to share some outside of the box thinking by Director Karpak, who's also a City of Kamloops councillor. He shared his experience at the recent FCM conference in Ottawa. At the last TNRD board meeting, he talked about discussing with the administrator of the Green Municipal Fund. Typically that fund, electoral areas, due to various factors, infrastructure and et cetera, are not eligible. But he had an idea of, doing a joint project region-wide or of some sorts, so that we can make application for the grants, Green Municipal Fund grants, as a TNRD. So that could involve and benefit electoral areas. He's asked the administrator to come meet the board sometime in July. So that's look forward to some good news and sharing that, so that potentially we can think of some projects for both District of Clearwater and Area A. Yeah. And then TNRD has been successful in both the Northern Development Initiative Trust and the Economic Trust of Southern Interior BC application for funding a TNRD grant writer role. You may have seen that on social media as well. I want to reiterate that while it's funded by those grants and the electoral areas, and you'll see that in the TNRD media release, it's supposed to support electoral area organizations, but any organization that benefits Area A, the Valley, should be supported by this grant writer. So if you have Clearwater organizations that, I don't think any organization in the Clearwater or Area A specifically say, we only look at members from, municipal boundary and such. So I think there is a lot of Clearwater organizations that should be eligible. So feel free to pass the word and let them know that they should reach out to the TNRD. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So moving on to delegations and presentations. Our first one is from Taseko Mines. Come up ahead. And Cora?
That's me, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for having us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Cora DeWalt Gagnon, and I'm here today to give you a little bit of an update. So first, just to reground, the Yellowhead project is a proposed open pit copper mine located in Simpcw. It is proposed in 90,000 tons per day open pit copper mine with a mine life of 25 years. We have initiated into the SIMP assessment process. And when we look at success that Taseko's had in the past, it's very similar in grade and mining method to Taseko's Gibraltar mine. Recently, I believe it was a couple months ago, Gibraltar celebrated their 20th year anniversary, and they looked at their 20 years of contributions and then the next 20 years. So there is the annual economic impact report that highlights some of those economic outputs, but also, in particular, that Gibraltar has 700 direct jobs and 2,860 spin-off jobs as a result of that mine. If Yellowhead was to go into production at 200 million pounds of copper per year, it would expand Canada's annual copper production by 16% over the 2023 levels. Next slide. Looking at the history of the project, the two properties were originally discovered between 1965 and 70. Harper Creek, Yellowhead Inc. Mining acquired the project in 2005, and they entered into the environmental assessment in 2015, where they was suspended due to facilitating additional tailings investigation and First Nations engagement. And in 2018, Harper Creek Provincial EA was terminated due to inactivity. In 2019, Taseko acquired Yellow Hink Mining, and we withdrew from the federal environmental assessment. In 2020, we did an updated technical report. And in 2022 and 2023, we worked with CIMP on a working group process. And in 2024, we entered into the CIMP process. Next slide. From our past engagement, when we met with Mayor and Council of Clearwater, some of the feedback we had heard, we've just put up on this screen. Through this process, what we would like to do is ensure that we are being responsive to feedback. And this will be a part of our application that is very shortly going to be provided to BCAO. So some of the things that you highlighted last time we were here was impacts to community infrastructure, interests in education opportunities for local youth, training and employment opportunities for community members, ensuring that you are engaged throughout the project and aware of updates and timelines, impacts to housing in the local area, as well as current community members earning a lower wage and how they may get priced out of the rental market. There were concerns regarding the impacts to local community power, and then also the social impacts of the mine after closure as well. Today, part of us coming back to engage with you is to provide you an update on timeline and the engagement so that we are being responsive to that. Next slide. So you may have heard we are having open houses. And so just recently, and I forget the date already, but earlier this month, we had our very first open house in Vavenby. And I can proudly say we had over 180 people attend that event.
Wow.
So it was a really great opportunity for us to allow community members to come and learn about the project, for them to meet our team, and again, answer questions, hear their concerns. And so we are hosting the Clearwater Open House on June 24th. That'll be here at the Dutch Lake Community Center. We have a caterer who will be providing burgers for the event, as well as we'll have information, poster boards about the various aspects of the mine. And we will have several team members there to walk people through what is the proposed mine, and listen to any of their concerns or feedback that they may have. So this is kind of the formal invitation to attend. We will also be having an open house in Barrier on June 25th, the following evening at our project office. And so that is us, again, meeting with community members, helping them understand the project before we enter into the formal process. And so just as a note, with that, there will be future open houses held by BCAO to further provide community members the opportunity to learn and give feedback as well. So this is just the first one that we'll be providing. Next slide. In terms of next steps, so again, we have those open houses, and then also starting tomorrow, we'll be doing coffee and conversation with the Yellowhead team. So community members are more than welcome to come on to the office between 10 and 12. We'll have coffee in the office, an opportunity to sit down with community members, again, have an opportunity for them to learn more about the project, and connect and learn together. So that's actually starting tomorrow, our very first one, but that'll be every third Wednesday of the month. We are very, very close to submitting our initial project description to initiate the BC and federal processes. So once that is submitted and accepted, that'll start a 90-day legislative early engagement period. And again, just to highlight, that's where further engagement can happen for community members to provide feedback and input on the project. Starting in July, we also have our 2025 site investigation program, and we have started environmental baseline studies. So similarly to last year, the site investigation program is about a 30-day program looking at geotechnical to help inform further permitting information. And then very, very soon, starting on Monday, we have our community relations advisor joining our team. So we're very excited to add an additional person to the team to have help, especially during next week, which is 2 full open houses. So she'll get lots of on-the-job training. And she's actually a resident of Clearwater. Yeah, next slide. And that was it. That was just a small update of us, but happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, I guess I'm glad to hear that there's going to be an open house coming on. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend it. I'm going to be gone. But at some point, I would love to sit down and have a conversation about some concerns I've got and things like that. So the coffee house, I think, is a great idea. And yeah, I look forward to working with the team and just seeing where things go from this point on.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that feedback. And of course, we'd love to have you for coffee. And if for some reason that day doesn't work too, we can reach out. At least with that time, we're blocking our calendars and the team will be available, everyone in the office. So
Go ahead.
I noticed you said there's something in there about the SIMP process. Can you enlighten on a little bit about that?
yeah, so the SIMP process is their own assessment process. So it's an Indigenous-led assessment process. So they've created their own process. So as opposed to only going through the BC process, you see more commonly Indigenous groups having their own process to ensure that their rights and interests are being reflected. And so, yeah, SIMP has developed their own assessment process, and we're currently in step 2 of that process.
Okay, and any idea how long that timeline is for something like that?
No, it's just like the BCAO process, if I'm being honest. Until you are further into the process, that helps define the timeline a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Sim.
Thanks very much. I think for the community services slide that you had shown, I think the only thing, if it was possible to amend it, is also to include the clinic. So we've got hospital and we've got RCMP, but I think also making sure that the clinic's involved in that. It's just important in the lessons learned from when we were able to host TMX.
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you. Yeah, we'll make a note. We can add that to that list as well. I think a lot of the learnings with Trans Mountain coming through is a great opportunity for us to learn and adapt as we go forward.
Anything else? Thank you very much. That was informative. You're making steps forward.
Awesome. The one note, sorry, that I will say, once we have formally entered into the process, that's the point in which we would make a request to come back and we could formally present the project itself in a little bit more detail. So we can go through the project, the aspects of the project, the transmission line, and other areas that may be of interest. So that'll be our next visit sometime in the summer, I would suspect.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to True Consulting, who is doing the OCP, Communications and Engagement Plan.
Afternoon, Council. For the record, my name is Gary Malenka. I'm with True Consulting. Also with me this afternoon is Brianne McCord. And she is with us, just started with us this week. We've been anxiously awaiting her arrival in the office. And she will be working with me, and she is going to be the OCP lead. So I'll be overseeing as the project manager and engagement specialist and supporting Brianne on the OCP end of things as well. So you'll see a lot of us over the months to come. So the purpose of the presentation this afternoon is to walk you through the proposed community and engagement plan. So there's a draft version, looks like it. You have it on your in front of you. So I'll walk you through some of the highlights of the plan. Next slide, please. Oops. Jen, I can do it from my end too, right? Yeah. Okay. I'm just waking up, apparently. Realizing there's technology on my end here. So in terms of the agenda for my brief presentation, I'm going to talk about the project in general, what our context is for public engagement, how we're approaching it, who we are going to be engaging with as we see it, how we're going to be engaging, and how do we measure success in terms of our engagement. And then I will touch on the various tiers that we've set up for contacts and speak to some of the key engagement activities that we have in the plan that'll take us through the OCP exercise. Hopefully, when I am done through that component, or if you have questions in between, if you have any insight or anything you want to add as well, please, and we can refine the plan. We've already gone through that with staff and made some revisions and edits, and more than happy to take additional feedback from yourselves as well if you think it can be fine-tuned. So in terms of the project, and as specifically as it relates to public engagement, we see it as a fundamental component to the effective decision-making of council and the community as a whole. And it's grounded in principles of mutual trust, transparency, and respect. So when we're going through these larger exercises, we have a pretty good focus on what we're trying to achieve. We want to be cognizant of who we're engaging at all different levels, and we'll get into that when I talk about the tiers and how this all builds. So we start from the top and work our way down, and as we work our way down, it just gets more solidified of a process in terms of what we're getting out of the engagement process. Ultimately, we're striving to come up with stronger, more inclusive outcomes through that process. Oh, maybe not. Jenna, can you do that slide? It's not clicking for me now. Oops. Thank you. So for the larger engagement processes we follow, we use what's referred to as the International Association of Public Participation, so otherwise referred to in our industry as the IAP2 process. And you see the spectrum before you on the screen, and it goes all the way from inform to consult, to involve, to collaborate, to empower. We're not going through all these steps in this OCP exercise. We are doing an update, so I am treating it a little differently than if we were doing a complete rewrite. And again, in an OCP, respectfully, we're not setting up a situation where the engagement is to empower everybody, because ultimately the final decision on the OCP rests with mayor and council. So our area will be on the inform level, and then we'll move over to the consult level, and we may creep over into the involve a little bit as to the right of the consult, but primarily you're going to see us in that consult range and inform range, where ultimately what we're doing is we're educating the community, various interest group stakeholders. We are soliciting feedback, but again, keeping in mind we're on a tight timeline, we are doing an update as opposed to a complete rewrite, so we're trying to stay focused as best as we can. Jenna, where should I be pointing? I was pointing at you and it was working, now it's not. Okay, I think we might be down. Team effort, thank you. So in terms of who are we engaging? So we're looking at obviously residents of the community, we're looking at business owners, we're looking at agencies at the provincial level, we're looking at various other interest groups, and we'll get into that. We're looking also at First Nations, obviously, as another important group to be communicating with and working alongside as we work on the update. So in terms of the tiers I've alluded to earlier, we have 3 sets of tiers, and in some cases there's some sub-tiers in the case of Tier 2A and Tier 2B. And this gives you an idea of where those tiers are broken up. I can always come back to this later if you like, or you can refer back to it in your notes, because I'll be walking through the different tiers. And at the bottom of the table, it just gives you some examples, depending on the tiers, what the level of engagement is, or what type of technique we're going to be using to engage. In some cases, certain events, certain activities work best with certain groups versus others, obviously. Jenna, please. Thank you. So in terms of how are we engaging? So our communication strategies and target audiences are chosen for each phase as we go through the project. Now, our engagement is tied to phases 1, 2, and 4 out of a 5-phase process that is laid out in our work plan for the OCP. But primarily our engagement is going to be centered on phase 1, and I'll get into that in a second. Phase 2, which is where we really start to jump into it, and then phase 4. So in terms of allowing the project team to see what we're working on and what isn't, this allows the project team to see what is working and what isn't working and adjust accordingly as we go through the process. So in terms of key terms, so you're going to see some consistent language start showing up here pretty soon. And that's just, this helps with the messaging. We don't want to come up with a whole bunch of different names, titles, what have you, as we go through the process. So this is going to be referred to as an OCP update. You're going to see that used a lot. Where possible, we will use official community plan and then work people through and help educate people through a bunch of acronyms as they go through it. What we've noticed in some municipalities is acronyms are the Achilles heel for a lot of people. And, you know, to be respectful, for me too. It's just a life of acronyms. So we will share what those acronyms mean, and in this case, official community plan will be used wherever possible with reference to the acronym OCP for those. And hopefully by the end, we'll do a quiz with everybody in the community and all know what an OCP is, and a ZBL, and a banana, and a NIMBY, and a, anyway. So in terms of other key messaging, we want to use some of the key messaging such as help shape Clearwater's future. The OCP update is underway to get people excited about what's coming forward in the months to come. We want to make sure that the messaging is we're updating the official community plan and we want your input. We will be sensitive and trying to differentiate where possible that, because there is a difference between rewriting an OCP and an update. An update is we have certain things we're mandated to deal with on the provincial end of things, as well as the scope of work that was agreed to with yourselves and staff. But clearly, we're not reinventing the OCP. It's a different exercise. It's a longer exercise, more thorough exercise. So we just want to make sure that everybody's expectations are clear, that we're coming in to touch on certain aspects of the OCP that we need to get updated. Other aspects we've been asked to visit. The CECO Mind is another example of where we're going to look at something that hasn't been in the OCP before, so we're going to explore that too. Oops. Yeah, Jenna, if you just, stay there. I think we jumped a slide, but just stay there if you will. I can speak to the previous slide. We also, in terms of messaging, we have an email address that's set up that's directly for OCP related. So it's ocp@docbc.ca. So everything will go through there. So there won't be any confusion on if they want to reach out and get information along the way. Also, if we're engaging provincial bodies, interest groups, what have you, they'll all be going through that email address. So it's all funneled through the same channels. We will be providing content for a dedicated OCP page on the district website. So I know there is one there now. That content will change slightly as we'll speak to and have a component dealing with the update and all the information that will come through there. Ultimately, when we present information to council and council is blessed it, if you will, be it a what we heard report or be other supporting documents, the intention is to get that on the website too after the fact so the public can then see in full transparency what council is dealing with and what they've signed off on. And in the case of what we heard reports, public always likes to know if their thoughts, comments have been incorporated in some way, shape, or form, or at least heard. And then in terms of messaging, in terms of phone calls, for those who want to do the phone calls, those will go through the office, and then they'll get funneled to the project team accordingly. So going back to the screen with terms of communication methods, as you can guess, there's various ways to get the message across to everybody. In the case of District of Clearwater, we will be taking advantage of the website, your Facebook page, any other social media channels that may become available through other partners. We will be using a program called SurveyMonkey to do the online surveys. We will also be creating an email list, a mailing list. In this case, we're typically using a program called MailChimp. So if anybody wants to be part of the process and follow along from start to finish on any updates, any indications of any meetings that come up, such as stuff even related to me, maybe even related to CECO and their open house is coming up, we can share that information through email blasts, if you will. And then any opportunity that the district may want to take advantage, if they're emailing out to the community as a whole, we can piggyback off of that if that's an effective tool too. It doesn't always come up, but it may be an option. And in terms of print media, we typically will go through some newsletters or newspaper advertisements where possible for some of the major events that are going to be posted. We have a couple of pop-up events slated. Those typically are kind of just organically, we pick a spot that we think is ideal for that particular time, and we show ourselves, and we just capture whoever we capture. So it isn't really announced. If that's something we want to look at, we can announce it. But in the case of the open house that we have scheduled coming up later on this year, that is something obviously we're going to have like a 2-3 week lead time, and we'll do a sort of a mass media blitz on that so everybody's fully aware of when it is, what the purpose is. We'll also, as a result of some other projects True's involved in, we're going to do some piggybacking because we have other bylaws and water metering program, et cetera, as for an example of those other programs that where we can have those events also coincide with the open house, similar to what we did in, I think it was January, this past couple of months back. It worked really effective. So I think staff's recognized that and asked us if we can try to coordinate that as well. So we're looking at trying to bring those different projects and align them as well in the open house timeline, same date, and then any other opportunity along the way where we can do some piggybacking, as I call it. So you'll be looking for that as well. There's an opportunity in terms of the print media to do mail-outs. Don't typically do those, they get costly. There's other ways through social media that we find more effective, but that's still an option if that district wants to go that route. And then we have the other methods, which is just simply direct communication to the interest groups, word of mouth essentially. So once we start getting the word of mouth through to the different groups as we reach out through what we call place speak, that word we find starts to filter through. And we find who our connectors are, if you will. So there'll be certain people we identify as connectors in the community that are really good at spreading the word. So once we can sort of figure out who those individuals are, they become our best friend for the next 6, 7, 8 months. Right. And we count on them to help get the word out. Okay, now it works. Okay, looks like we're skipping a slide again. Bear with me here. There we go. So in terms of how do we measure success? So along the way when we go through this process, we're going to keep an eye on what we're seeing in terms of reach, what we're seeing in terms of participation. And that's just a barometer for us to say, okay, the methods we're using, are they working? And if they aren't, then we'll need to adjust along the way. And while we may go one route and it may slip up, and we may not hit some of those targets, then we'll quickly do that adjustment as best as we can, knowing what we know, and try to recapture some of those numbers or that interest. We're usually pretty good at hitting some of those numbers. Every community is different. Time of year is different. I know we're walking into this in the summer starting right away, and some of our initial engagement is going to be in July. So we're aware of that as well. So we'll do our best to try to get that word out and reach out to those people, even during some of those periods of the year when it may not be ideal.
Just
It's like there's a sweet spot somewhere around here. I don't know where it is. Jenna, please, one more.
There you go.
So again, we'll be gauging participation and demographics. One of the key things for us, especially for an OCP, is to try to hit the various demographic groups where possible. So, I mean, we're looking at seniors, elders, we're looking at youth, where possible. We're looking at younger families, if we can target them in reaching out, and those can typically be captured at open houses. Business owners, that's more one-on-one. So as I go through some of the engagement activities, you're going to see that we're going to try to direct our attention one-on-one to some of the business owners. We won't be able to have the capacity to hit every business owner up and have a conversation, but we will try to do our best to grab who we can, who's willing to talk to us about what's working, what's not working, what's their vision for the next 20 years, et cetera. District residents, like just as a whole, if you want to clump everybody together, open house is good for that. Sharing information via the website will be a good way to disseminate information. The survey will be the best way to capture a lot of feedback from a lot of different groups, some who may not even be in the community at that particular time, that may still be able to provide their feedback, or may own property here but don't reside here, so they'll miss some of the in-person events. So the survey will work well in that respect. And again, even possibly for some of the regional residents that may have an interest. Jenna, please, again. I know it's 50-50 right now. My percentages are off. So here we're at the tiers. So what we've done is we typically, when we go through these exercises, we identify a contact list and we break it up into tiers. And the primary tier obviously is yourselves as mayor and council. So you're the decision makers. In this particular case for this exercise, we're going to be reaching out to you here within days now, once we get the green light on this plan, to arrange for the one-on-one discussions with each of you, as well as we're going to set up a survey for all of you to provide input anonymously, so no one's looking over anybody's shoulders. And we'll get feedback that way to gauge, okay, is council on the same page? If they're not, where are we going? And this is where we want to sort of get a sense of, is the vision in the OCP still applicable? Does it need to be tweaked? What are the hot topics or the issues that you want to see us look at in the OCP? There'll be elements that'll be in there for questions that'll be part of the mandated requirements from the province. So we'll be talking about housing needs in a few cases as well. And then throughout the process as a whole, we're going to come back and report back to not only staff, but yourself at various stages with the documentation. Starting from, like I said, the first initial engagement with you guys in the next week, 2 weeks, to the putting out of what we heard report for the first round of engagement in July. And then we get into what we're going to talk about here in a second about the visioning workshop, and then the open house in the fall. And then finally, the OCP reveal later next, or early next year, I should say. Next slide, please. So then we move on to Tier 2A. And that just gets more refined. So as you can see here, it's essentially staff. Or we're looking at the CEO, we're looking at fire chief and the various directors that play a role in how the municipality's overseen. And on all of those levels, they're providing input to us, whether it's dealing with infrastructure, whether it's dealing with bylaw development as we're going through this exercise. And obviously on the finance side, on the numbers side, it will come into play to some extent, I would imagine. And then Fire Chief and Fire Smart will come into play in the OCP. Some of that language isn't in there now, and we'll need to rely on the Fire Chief and their team to help us through it. Next slide, please. Then we skip over to Tier 2B, and that's where you start seeing us go outside of the district itself, the municipality itself. So groups such as the Wells Grey Country Senior Society, that's a group we've already established a meeting, I think it's September 8th or 9th. We're scheduled to sit down with them during one of their luncheons. And so we'll have a discussion about what the OCP means to them. And at that point, putting it in September, we will have a lot of base information we can share with them and get their feedback. You have Evergreen Acres Senior Housing Society. Yellowhead Community Services Society plays a pretty pivotal role in the community. So we want to reach out to them and get feedback on the services they provide, and if that can be captured in the OCP, if it already is, if we need to have additional policies or language put in there to support what their needs are to help the community as a whole. And then let's not forget arts and culture. So the Wells Grey Lively Arts Society will be a group that we'll reach out to and hopefully have a good discussion with regards to what does arts and culture mean in the community, and how can we in any way put in policy or support policy or continue to keep policy in there that supports the arts and culture for the community. And then we have the Clearwater Secondary DPAC. As I understand it, yes, you have elementary and you have the secondary, but it sounds like everything kind of goes through the DPAC. No. It doesn't? Okay. So I guess the question then, if I can jump out of my presentation for a second, are we best reaching out to the separate PACs for the different schools?
So your elementary school and your high school will each have their own parent committees, and they each have their own presidents there.
Okay.
And then DPAC is the overarching body for all of the parent groups within SD 73.
Oh, all of the SD 73.
So
Okay. So we should stay close. Okay. There will be a component later on dealing with just directly with the students out of the River Raft, out of the Raft River. Thank you. Switched it up with Raft River. And we'll get into that in a little bit too, but we may not get a lot out of the PACs, but we find we don't get much out of the principals either. So if we can reach to the parents and they can provide feedback, great. Where possible, if we can get into the schools and just talk to the kids, that's probably the most impactful for us, we find, for personally, professionally, and then the kids, I think, usually get a kick out of it too, because they can look at things from a little different. They can take it home, get their parents excited about maybe an open house coming up in October. Next slide, please. So then we move on to Tier 3. And Tier 3 is sort of the further outside bodies. So right now, we've circulated to a number of First Nations. So you'll see on the list here, we're dealing with Simp, Teskin, which is Canham Lake, Adams Lake, and Niskunlith. So what we'll do is we'll be preparing our letters that'll go from mayor to chief, and then once that initial engagement is kick-started, if you will, then we'll start reaching out directly to their band managers or CAOs, whatever their structure is. A number of these entities we have connections with through some of our other work, so hopefully that'll help bridge that gap that may exist if we didn't have those connections and speed up consultation. Once that's set up, we will then approach the First Nations who have expressed an interest in being involved and ask them how they want to be engaged. We don't find it effective for us to tell them how it's going to work. Now, that can be complicated in some ways because we're on a tight budget and a tight timeline, but we'll do what we can to work with the First Nations as best as we can in a space that works for them. We're bringing in Interior Health into the discussion, as well as TNRD and MOTT. Interior Health has a group that we found in other examples plays a pretty good role in helping out. It's almost like they have their own OCP planning team. So we'll be reaching out to them again, as they did with another project we're involved in, and seek their assistance. And they were more than anxious and helpful in helping us pull apart the existing OCP for the other municipality and coming up with suggested policy not only benefits them, but even on a larger basis, because I think the planner in them kind of seeps out and they lose track of just focusing, which is great. We take any help we can get. So we look forward to engaging with Interior Health on a really in-depth level, my guess would be, compared to what we would do if we're engaging TNRD or MOTT. School District 73, we may be contacting and looking to. We'll be pulling numbers from them in terms of what their enrollment is, projections, and see how that impacts what's in the OCP now versus where we see that maybe going in the future, next 10, 20 years. And then the Community Energy Association. So we've added another component to the OCP exercise, which is looking at climate change impact and resiliency. So with what's going on now with you guys working with the Community Engagement Association, we're going to be working alongside them as well. And they've already reached out. We suspect that they'll be providing us with some questions for the survey that's going to come out here shortly. Also probably get some language into the survey that you guys are going to see as council directly. And so you'll see them involved along the way as they're doing their project, we're doing ours, and how kind of work together. And then next slide, please. And then we have one more group that we don't know how to place them. Oh, she's gone. But we know they play a role that's going to potentially be significant for this community and others in the area. So we'll be connecting with the Seco Mines. It's great to see that they're already starting to do their engagement exercises. We know where their office is in Barrier, so we'll take every opportunity we can to find out their numbers. I'm curious to get a copy of their Gibraltar numbers, obviously, and see what those impacts were like. So we'll be looking at those as we come up with, for lack of better words, right now, a technical memo that'll support the OCP on if Taseko Mines is set up, what does that mean to the community, and what does that mean in terms of the OCP document that you're going to have in front of you. We recognize that timing for this is, many, many years before it unfolds and before it's completed and operational. And the OCP will be required to be revisited every 5 years now because of the province and housing needs. So there'll be an opportunity to update the OCP in 5 years. Taseko Mines will be a lot further along. We'll have a different picture then and have a clearer picture then. But for now, we definitely want to get a sense of what they can share with us and what that may mean in terms of housing, commercial needs, et cetera, for you, as well as servicing requirements. So in terms of engagement activities, as I alluded to, there's phase 1, phase 2, and phase 4. So phase 1 is pretty straightforward. It's just us getting the project initiated. It's us getting this communication engagement plans in front of you and staff and getting your blessing on it so we can move forward with it. You then have a sense of what our approach is going to be, and we trust, hope, wish that you'll put everything you have behind it in the community to support it and push it. So when we start going, that's all you're talking about is OCP update for the next 7 months, just like we're going to be thinking about you for the next 7 months. And we'll kickstart that off, obviously, with the questionnaire and the individual one-on-ones with yourself. So that's essentially the phase 1. Next slide, please. So where I guess the pavement hits the road is phase 2. This is where we really start moving in terms of getting out to the community. So it's just something as simple as getting invitation letters out to some of those various groups that I've alluded to in the various tiers, and letting them know and advising them that we are moving forward with an OCP update. And we'd like their support, their feedback. In some cases, we'll be reaching out for further discussion. I did allude to the First Nations component. It's a little different, so we'll take that approach that we found has worked for us and is respectful of their needs and wants in that process. We will then be working on that promotional campaign that'll be kickstarting in early July, maybe late June, but most likely early July we'll do the launch. And that's, again, where we're going to have content on the OCP website, content going out leading up to some of the exercises we'll be leading into in the month of July. First off being the community survey. So the survey is going to be a barometer for us to sort of go out there and sort of say, okay, what are the hot spots? What works for you in the community? What doesn't? Where do you see yourself in 20 years? Where do you see the community in 20 years? I guess it's more so how I want to word it. Is the vision statement still applicable? Does it need to be fine-tuned? Is there components of any of the mapping, for example, that doesn't make sense, and especially as it relates to land uses? So the land use designations, do you have any suggestions on, does that make sense? Does it need to be tweaked? With all due respect, your mapping now is a little tough to read, so we'll have to play with that a bit so it's easier for people to read it when we present the existing mapping. Obviously, we're going to redo all the mapping, so hopefully it'll be a little easier to digest, recognizing that this day and age on the GIS system is way more effective, but we still have hard copy. Then we touch on in-person engagement. So it isn't a full-on open house in July. What our approach is, again, being mindful of budget and timing, is we want to do essentially a pop-up event. We're going to, intention is to come out for a day. We'll set up for a pop-up event. I think we'll talk with staff when we figure out an appropriate day. Say, okay, where's the best place for us to place ourselves? Apparently, Subway's, I think, the best place today to be positioned, because that place was hopping today, and Timmy's was lined up too. So maybe we're positioning ourselves in the parking lot. We couldn't find the bus. The bus showed up later, but we had figured there was a bus somewhere because there was a lot of people that sort of showed up all of a sudden. But anyway, we did find the bus, I'm pretty sure. Yet the parking lot was still full. So anyway, I think we found ground central for that first pop-up event. We will be doing in-person meetings. So that's where I alluded to already about talking to the business owners. So whether it be in what I'll call the old town center for the sake of argument, and the commercial area off the highway, we'll focus on the business operators in those areas and have conversations with them. I know there is some other business operators sort of scattered in the community. If we get a chance, we're going to pop in and see if we can get there or two during that time. So there's probably going to be 3, maybe 4 of us in the community that day. And if we'll try to capture as much as we can. If we have to bleed over another day, we'll look at that. But in terms of timing and budget, we're going to try to have an intensive that day. And that's, again, to let everybody know we're working on an OCP update, try to get some key information out of them in a sort of informal basis. And then we move on to what I refer to as place speak. And that's going to kick in July and probably just extend through the summer months. That one's a little easier to do because that's where we're going to talk to the various entities like Interior Health, the seniors group, the arts group, for example. We'll meet them or talk to them on their schedule, whether it's in person, most likely it's going to be virtual. We've done a lot of those virtually and they work. And whether that's with one individual for that organization or multiple, we're game. We've had some where we've had 4 or 5 show up at the call, and it's great. The more input, the better. So that'll take place over a couple of months as we start to gather more and more information from the different entities. I won't go on about First Nation engagement. I've already sort of laid out the groundwork for how that's going to work. And I assume by July, maybe August at the latest, we'll have a sense of, okay, which First Nations want to be involved in the process and which ones are like, I'm okay, I'm good. I think we have a sense already, but we do need to reach out to those who are identified as being in the area and having an interest. Out of that, all those exercises, or most of those exercises, except for the council session, we'll produce a what we heard report. So that'll basically capture everything that we've heard, everything that we've gleaned, including the survey results, and present that back to you so you have an idea of what we're seeing, what we're hearing. And maybe that'll resonate with you as council, maybe it won't. And we can have a discussion on why are you hearing something different than us, or no, we're all on the same page. I think that's where we get that. And it may come to a situation where you're seeing something in the what we heard report that you don't agree with, and we may have to go dig a little deeper in what that means or why. And so that presents an opportunity as well for us. And then we're sort of done with summer, and then we get into some of the bigger exercises. So there was a discussion with council and staff about doing a visioning workshop. So we've been able to bring in a gentleman named Chris Fields. He's with a company called Rynick. He's out of Okotoks, just outside of Calgary. And he's done a lot of work across Western Canada with regards to branding, wayfinding, signage, economic development, visioning exercises as it relates to economic, our downtown cores and what have you, downtown centers. He's done a number of OCPs for other colleagues of mine. So he's agreed to come on board for this particular workshop and lead it, and we'll be providing the support to him. And the intent of the workshop is really to figure out, okay, if we're having a town center, where's the best place for this town center? And what does that town center look like now and 20 years down the road? And so the idea is to come out of that with a good sense of what our core is for the district and put the full weight behind it, and then get that information put into the OCP through policy, through illustrations, et cetera. The expectation is this isn't just a council exercise. We want to have it set up that we have community leaders in the group as well. So that's something we'll work with staff and probably mayor and council on who those group leaders are in the community. Sort of like that idea of the connectors kind of thing. And bring those individuals to the table as well. So it's council, it's mayor, some staff, as well as the community leaders, and go through that workshop, which we anticipate will be either a morning or afternoon session, and be fully interactive, where we're really just asking you guys to tell us what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what do you like, what you don't like. And we'll have our team there documenting like crazy, sketching like crazy, so we can take that information and bring it forward into the draft OCP. And there's the Raft River Elementary visioning exercise I was alluding to. So as it was mentioned, if we can get into the schools, it's always a fun time to reach out to the youth. I like the elementary as opposed to the secondary grades, so I'm specific, maybe because my wife who's a teacher works in the elementary kind of world, and we think they're more malleable. And they're more patient. They're not sarcastic as my older kids are. So the idea would be is that we'll reach out to the principal and see if there's something we can coordinate in September, October, once they sort of get settled back into school, where we're doing a visioning exercise, maybe it's sort of a quasi presentation for a class. And maybe it's a 5-6 or a split class or something. Maybe there's an opportunity to bring some classes together. Again, that's a discussion with the principal on what format may work if they're willing to entertain it at all. And the idea would be it's kind of like a mini visioning exercise, and it's not similar to what we're doing with council and the group leaders. It's looking at the OCP as a whole. The closest I can come to it, and I'm not saying we're going to do this, but it's like, here's a bunch of Lego pieces. What do you want to see go where? Where do you see parks? Where do you see stores? Where do you see homes? What kind of homes? And sometimes you'd be surprised what the kids will come back at you with. A lot different sometimes than what the adults think, because they don't have those barriers in their head, right? That ballpark hasn't been created for them yet, that we all kind of have grown to live within or play within. So the visioning exercise for the students, we're anticipating to be September, October. Next slide, please. So then we go into phase 4. This part here puts us into the fall. Just like the student exercise did. But the intent here is to go back to council and staff and have, for lack of better words, it's a workshop, but it's probably more just an open discussion about what we're calling draft directions. So we won't necessarily have a draft of the OCP at that point, because it's a bit midway of the process, but we'll have a pretty good handle on where we're probably taking the OCP in terms of structure, in terms of key elements. We'll have the vision and the goals in our head laid out for us as we see it at that point. So some of those key components of the OCP, we want to sit down with council and staff and see what resonates and have that open discussion about, I think we're all on the same page. No, I think we need to tweak it before we go to the public. Because the next step after we do that workshop with staff and council is we want to take basically not a draft of the OCP, but draft directions of the OCP and some of the key components and take it to the community in October, late October, ideally, if not early November, for an open house. And that's that open house I alluded to earlier, where we'll try to coordinate with other projects we have going on as well. And if the district has other opportunities they want to jump on as well and piggyback for this, they can do that as well. I know we had multiple, I think it was five or six tables set up at the January one for different reasons. So it could be an opportunity to do the same where we have a bunch of things going on. But hopefully the open houses for the OCP is front and center, because that's our baby. We'll be supporting our team on the other exercises too. So the open house will be your typical format. Just drop in. We're not going to do a presentation. It doesn't really work well in most cases, and it doesn't work on people's schedules always. So with a drop in, you can come and go as you please, ask questions of the team throughout the evening. We'll be trying to solicit more information, fine tune some things from the community to see if we're on the right track from what we've heard earlier, and that'll help us go to the draft version of the OCP. So in the month of November, December, and January, we'll be putting pen to paper, bringing back a draft OCP, ideally in February, early February if possible. We know we're trying to hit an end of March target for completion. We also understand that in order for that to happen, you may need to have legal review of the OCP document. You need to bring it through a couple of readings, so you'll need some time to do that. So I ideally don't want to take it, the reveal to the community of the draft and ultimately to council to too late in the project timeline, if you will. So we'll be shooting for January, ideally February most likely, for bringing the draft out. So just to note, that is the final step in terms of consultation engagement. In some cases, we'd have an open house that would show the OCP draft. But because the way we're setting this up, we have summer kind of getting in our way a little bit, budget and timing. We're going to release the OCP, our proposal is, and not be necessarily looking for feedback or any more information from the residents other than here's the draft version. It's now up to council to give us direction on what needs to be tweaked. So that's sort of our approach in that. So it may be a little different than other times you've seen it or other places. And we can talk about that if you think that's going to be an issue. But that's the approach we're taking based on our work plan. And that concludes my spiel, if you will. I'm happy to take any feedback or questions or suggestions on things we can maybe tweak or things we can add or take away.
Any questions? Councillor Sim.
Thanks very much, and it was a really thorough sort of explanation, especially going into the tier 1s, tier 2s, and the various things. There was a couple of questions about the inclusion in there. You've got a number for the Wells Gray seniors, the Evergreen Acres seniors. Yellowhead sort of hits that young families and otherwise. There's the Lively Arts, but I might also suggest the North Thompson Arts Council. And the North Thompson Arts Council sort of serves as an umbrella for the Wells Gray Lively Arts, so I think that gives a wide representation there.
Thank you.
And I think it's marvelous that your wife is an elementary school teacher, because they really are dynamic and fantastic. And if you go down to Raft River, you will see the outdoor classroom that was actually built on the input of students. So to your point, yes. But I also would strongly suggest engaging the high school. And one, because we've got small numbers, less than 200 students. And that they know what it is to be a part of community, because their own high school operates that way. Many of those students are the volunteers that help run our programs. They are the employment force. Some of them have started
They're
businesses.
keeners out here?
They're keeners.
They're keeners.
Not in my school where my kids are. Okay.
Yeah, and so I share that because they do have ideas, and they're really articulate, and they are engaged. And also, many of their teachers have been here for a long time. They believe in the engagement of civics. So I speak really passionately about these kids. Okay. And I do remember when the mayor had gone in and talked about the budgeting process. And once you get them started and start saying, here's why, it's amazing. And I think that you might also be really pleasantly pleased to work with the principal up there. He's quite proactive. So that is my sales pitch for
I will
CSS.
look into how that could maybe work with both schools. Thank you.
Yeah, just for that, they just really are great, and especially coming off grad weekend, just a remarkable group there.
Before you go on, though, with that, I just want to add on to the high school. I think you might have them come up with ideas of why they would come back to Clearwater. Because right now they're leaving to go to school, but they're not having anything to come back to. What can they?
So what would it be? What would draw
can
them
they?
back?
Exactly. And I think you might find some really exciting answers there. Sorry, Councillor Sim, but I just wanted
No,
to
I
add
think
that.
that's a really good one. I'm also wondering about some of the social enterprises, and I speak to the food bank and the Curiosity Shop. They maybe target a demographic that isn't captured in other ways that you've discussed.
Okay.
Clearwater being so spread out, transportation isn't always easy here. And so who do we miss as a result of not having that transportation? So that is a potential outreach, even just to share surveys or anything. It's that one-to-one
Is it
contact.
Curiosity Shop?
Yeah, it's our thrift store.
Okay.
Very powerful group of people there.
They really are.
And then I really liked how you had touched on, how to reach out to the businesses. Did I understand it that you were actually going to make appointments with them as opposed to just doing the pop buys?
For those ones where we're going to, in the case of July, ideas is to sort of just show up and see what we can do for attention, like catch them off guard and say, hey, do you have 5 minutes to talk? We don't want to necessarily set up appointments at that stage. We just want to get in their head for a little bit. That doesn't mean we can't say, if you have more to say, let's set something up afterwards, and we can do it virtually because we're going to be out of the community at that point.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing in your presentations, there's a couple of things that kind of struck out. Is I was wondering how to really target that 20 to 40 age group. And that 20 to 40 age group is a lower number of our demographic, but it's a demographic that's really important for our community visioning. And they're so diverse. And so you're wondering about outreach. I think about how active the ball fields are nowadays. That's a really important sort of outreach. I also wonder if you would ever consider things like 50 under 50, which is your entrepreneurs as well as your people who are under 50, and how they can envision their community. People have got lots of thoughts, and the pop-bys, I'm not sure that that's always who we are as a community. I think that I really liked what you said about building that trust and engagement, and that trust as engagement means making that commitment to connect with our citizens. And I think that that's what they're really eager for.
If I may, the chair, some of these entities that you talked about with the 20 to 40 age group, when we come back and say, okay, who are some of these key leaders when we're doing the visioning exercise too? I'm guessing there's maybe some names that you guys have in your head on who some of these individuals are that should probably be part of that group for the visioning exercise. You probably want to have some representation at that workshop as well, in addition to.
Yeah, I mean, my table's pretty big, so I always look about maybe who hasn't stepped up as a leader, but is certainly somebody who is important to this community. And so not necessarily, they may not define themselves as a leader, but certainly as a doer.
Yeah, and sorry, when I say leader, maybe I don't mean to take it out of context. It's somebody who can provide some really good feedback. And they may be the quietest person in the community, but they're knowledgeable. So to me, that's a leader as well in the community. You lead by.
Yep, and that's
being
okay.
quiet,
I mean, this community, we've got such good, hardworking people that takes on many different faces, and I am so excited about this process and making sure that their voices are heard and in there in one way, shape, or form. And my last one is it sounds like you're working with staff to maybe do an outreach to our business licenses and doing that direct email to them, because we do have a number of businesses that are not storefront.
home-based.
They're home-based. And I think the other really important part about this is that Clearwater has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. And we've seen such a surge of new people who have come from other places. And so we haven't yet set up a rhythm of engagement. And if they are operating with a business and have a business license, I think that that's a really valuable gateway to reach these new people who have a lot to say and other perspectives that maybe they want to share. Yeah.
Well, then maybe out of that comes a home-based business working group that we sit down and have a more formal meeting later on as well with, as we go through it, reaching out through one-on-one with them where possible, but also maybe bringing a bunch of them together to sort of share some thoughts.
At the risk of overstepping, which is, I always do
Maybe
it.
good for networking too.
I would happily even, introduce you, and maybe we look at doing like an evening for them down at the ski hill. And I think it's a very safe place where it would be very welcome and say, this is such
Not
an
overstepping
exciting
at all, no.
process. So lots of connections there. But I just want to make sure that we are touching the points where maybe maybe we wouldn't have normal outreach just because of our size and our how we're spread out.
No, these are good. These are things that I don't, not living in the community, I don't have access to necessarily. So I appreciate a lot of this feedback. I may end up following up with you just to get some clarity on a few things as well. So thank you.
I think that's all.
Any other questions? No?
I actually
one more.
Sorry. What I am also hoping is if we can nail down some dates. And I know that we had discussed this when we were talking at council how we were going to do this, but even just what are those dates going to be, so we can really, not only will council be able to lock them into the calendars, community can lock them into the calendars, but it's just far more helpful than just a week in advance. But what are the significant ones, and can we get those locked and loaded?
So through the chair, once we get council's blessing on this, within the week and a half, we'll be able to lock the dates up with staff and figured, okay, ideal locations for certain things, ideal dates. I know internally at our office, we're looking at cross-referencing our projects and dates too. So once we have sort of and the OCP is sort of leading all the other engagement because of some of the key targets or dates. So yeah, we want to set the dates. We just didn't want to commit to anything until we knew this was supported.
Yeah, no, as long as that's coming, I just find it really helpful for people's
It
planning
will
and
be
schedules.
within a week, 2 weeks at most.
Great, thank you.
Oh, Councillor Matheson?
Yeah, thanks for that. That was a great presentation. Hopefully you can get a hold of me in the next few days. I'm going to be gone on Monday, so I'd love to get some. I've got some really good input that I want to throw in there. So if somebody can contact me.
And sorry, you said you were gone Monday?
Pardon? Yeah,
You said-
I'm gone Monday morning.
Okay. So we'll ramp you up to later this week then if possible.
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great because I'll be off the grid for the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, anything else? Okay, well, thank you. That was really good report. I'm really excited about this. I think this is going to be fun.
Yes, we are too. Looking forward to it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So is there do we have to make a recommendation on moving on this? Yeah, I think this,
I don't think we
Nope.
need a recommendation.
okay.
Actually, let me change my tune a little bit. I think it might be useful to say that you approve the communications and engagement plan with the additions suggested in the meeting.
Okay.
Just so that later on, if there's an issue where we say, hey, what about this and this, then we could say, well, that was or wasn't in the plan, right? So
Okay.
that might be a useful
Okay,
step.
would someone like
Thank
to
you.
make that recommendation? Councillor Matheson, Councillor Sim seconded. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, so moving on to adoption of the minutes for June 3rd. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, would someone like to make the recommendation? Councillor Bratton, Councillor Matheson, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, so moving on, there's no adoption of minutes of committee meetings, no development of zoning, unfinished business. Moving on to the school district DPAC letter to mayor and council. We sort of went by this in the last meeting and we didn't say much about it, but Councillor Matheson, I understand you have something to say?
Yes, I did a little research on it and looked at it, and I am concerned about the cut in funding, the recent funding shortfalls, the cutting staffs and essential student supports, and it's not just numbers on the spreadsheet, but it also affects people, students with real consequences. I would like to call on the province of BC to update the education funding model to reflect today's economic realities. Funding is not kept up. It's on a student basis, and I think the province has some mandate behind that to bring it up to level. It's a community issue, and I think especially in a rural area where we have limited access to things, to other options, and I fully support calling for the province to up their funding.
Any other?
I think Sun Peaks had written a very good letter that articulated much of what you're saying. I think every community, values their schools, even just what we were talking about with, our kids and the staff and parents and, all of it. It does take a village. And there are some deficiencies in the provincial funding. Also some things that probably need to be looked at in terms of bargaining by way of just things that have been negotiated but not covered by payments by the government. So it's left to the shoulders of school districts. So everything you're suggesting is just terrific. So
writing a letter of support.
Yeah, I think school district number 73 has done wonders working with the horrible situation that they find themselves in with this. And I think they've made some good, decisions in some aspects, but I think the province really needs to step up on this. So it's just untenable, especially for a small community like this.
So would somebody want to make a recommendation that we write a letter of support to the DPAC? Councillor Bratton, Councillor Matheson, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, moving on to councillors' reports. Since the mayor's not here. Councillor Bratton.
And I just wanted to, I didn't have a lot to say, but I wanted to mention, I was going to see if Director Zhao was going to mention it, but Argo is undergoing bridge maintenance in on Vavenby Bridge, June 24th to 27th, and they actually have hours of opening and closing. So it's Tuesday to Friday, and it's 9, they're open, reverse that. They're closed 9 to 12, 1 to 3:45, and 6 to 10 p.m. Keep up on the social media. I'm sure they're going to be posting and updating everybody if any of that adjusts. But Jarrett Waddell is your contact with Argo if you have any concerns or questions. And grad was just this past weekend, and it must have went off really well because I have not heard one bad thing or any crazy stories. So good job, kids and parents and everybody organizing. And other than that, I don't have anything else.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson.
Not a lot to report. I was away getting educated for a couple of weeks, and I'm back, and then I'll be gone for another 3 weeks. And we'll see you mid-July, I guess.
Thank you. Councillor Sim.
Thanks very much. It was grad, so it's always super because that gym is packed and there's lots of activity and the grad parade and lots of appreciation again to the community support that goes with that. They had their prom down at the ski hill. In participating in some of those things, lots of conversations, and I'll just share some of the community feedback that I got. One was on our cemetery. And there was a question of whether or not the district would ever consider looking at a QR code that allowed people to easily access what's available. So it became a little more streamlined. So very similar to like a business license or an application for subdivision or anything like that. What's our process for the cemetery there? The Dutch Lake Beach, it's been really nice that the contractor has been updating on some of the work that's being done there. Is there a plan for the cement barricades? We'll follow up.
We'll follow up on that one. Thank you.
Yeah. And then also for just following it, I just appreciated the CAO just doing some updates on the Dutch Lake and some of those testing. And I think it's really great that people are seeing that lake as such an asset, and you're clear dialoguing out to community members that we are putting that on our radar, which is wonderful. And then the other one, there was lots of activity down at the ball fields. And I went down and was watching, and one of the out-of-town teams sort of made a comment about the burned car on the side of the highway. And so I thought that was probably an interesting perspective. From a visitor, it looks like it's a burned-out car. From a local, it's part of the fire department training. So is there a way to maybe identify it, which is just a visual translation of what goes on? It was just an interesting comment from one of the visitors there, because they go down the hill and
You see it on the right-hand side there?
yeah, so it was just interesting there. And lastly, I just want to acknowledge two students from Raft River, Aurora and Dahlia. They were both selected for Young Artists for all of SD 73. Yeah, which is kind of a big deal.
Congratulations.
It was a huge deal. We've never had two students from Raft River at the same time be acknowledged. Their artwork will be hung in the school board office. I personally would love it if we could maybe abscond it and have it here, because they were beautiful, what they had done. And the final one was watching people really get engaged with pickleball. It seems to be quite the rage. And there was a request is if the district would ever post the rules so that new people could figure out how it's played.
That's a good idea.
That's what my son said too. And that's it. So, just gratitude for that and watching how things are coming along. And certainly the Rotary Bee Garden is just blooming beautifully.
Yes, yes, it is. Okay, thank you. And moving on to the CA report. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the point of this report is it's a little lengthy, I apologize, but it is talking about Dutch Lake water quality issues. And from a staff perspective, we've been dealing with this one for a little bit of time now. We thought it was important just to provide a bit of a community update. So we started receiving complaints about the lake early in the year. People were worried about the early turnover of the lake, the color, the smell of the lake, the lack of clarity on the lake, what looked like to be an early algae bloom. And though I guess those are the main concerns, along with the question, is the lake safe for swimming? And we've heard that quite a number of times. So there's two real big issues that have arose. First, is the lake safe for swimming and recreation? And then the other issue, it's kind of a background issue, but it keeps coming up, is what about the overall health of Dutch Lake? Is it deteriorating? We've heard a lot about it. Councillor Sim, you brought up a issue I believe it was about a month ago, about a report that was done in Dutch Lake in 1982. That's still probably the leading report on the lake, and it raised some concerns there, right? So the question is, how do we deal with those issues? So is Dutch Lake safe for recreational use? So there's actually no methodology for determining the safety of a lake unless you start doing regular testing. Most beach operators do testing on their beach. And the recommendation is that we do testing on that beach as well. Water testing is quite seasonal when it comes to beach. What looks murky at one time of the year will be crystal clear at another time of the year, right? So testing allows you, if it's done on a regular basis, allows you to say, yeah, the beach is still good. So that's what we have started to do. And actually, the first test is going in this week. And we are the responsible party as the beach operators for testing that. It's not a MOE responsibility, it's our responsibility. So we've initiated that beach water testing program. And those tests are taken from the dock, and they'll be taken on a weekly basis. And the water tests will actually be conducted by IHA. As mentioned, the first test will be taken this week. And the intent behind the information is to let the public know. Now, beach testing is a bit of a two-edged sword, right? So it's great because it helps the public to know it's safe. It's safe for the kids to be in the water. It's safe for people to be around the water. But the two-edged sword part is if it becomes unsafe, and you know it's unsafe, then it forces us as the beach operators to close that. So that's the risk once you start testing. But given the level of complaints that we were seeing, I don't think we would be doing our jobs as trying to protect the public if we didn't do that regular testing. And it's no different than what we do on our water system. We test that regularly because the public safety is really important to us. So, and at this point, the early lake turnover has received a lot of public attention, but I should state we have no reason to presume at this point it's unsafe for swimming. So any messaging coming out of this, we're not saying it's unsafe. We're saying we need to test it and find out and ensure that it is safe. So then the other issue is, and it's the bigger issue, is the health of Dutch Lake deteriorating. And the health of a lake is an interesting thing because the health of a lake isn't gauged by how well aquatic plants grow in the lake. In fact, that's a negative sign of health typically. The health of the lake is you want a clear lake where fish can thrive and hopefully minimize some of the algae blooms. And there's two issues that were raised by the earlier report by Dr. Richard Norden. And the issues raised, I believe, are still there. And first, it's a very high nutrient load in the lake. And that's due to septic systems and potentially other nutrient-rich runoff water or chemical-rich runoff water. We just had an event recently where we saw some runoff from the old North Thompson Highway that washed out an area of the beach. Well, that water's going to end up in the lake. And it's probably has some road salt in it, maybe has some, if there was fertilizer used on the grass there, it would have some of that content in it as well. So there's all kinds of sources for water to get into lakes, not necessarily only septic systems. But Dutch Lake is considered to be eutrophic, which means that the nutrient loading in the lake is increasing, and that leads to more aquatic plants and more algae. Plants and algae consume the oxygen in the lake. And in some cases, algae blooms themselves can become toxic. Not toxic in the sense that if you touch the water, you're going to die, but toxic in the sense it's not healthy to be in the water. And that potentially has a further impact on fish or human health. The other issue, and it's in addition, it's kind of a compounding factor with the high nutrient load, is the really, really slow refresh rate of Dutch Lake. Dutch Lake, according to the estimates done again by Dr. Norden when he did his study, is estimated at 20 years. And that's incredibly slow for a lake. So that means for the existing water in the lake to be gone and replaced with new water is a 20-year cycle. That's just an estimate, and it's based on a number of factors. It's based on average precipitation, the size of the watershed collecting water for the lake, the amount of the known outflows from the lake, and the estimated evaporation rates. So it would change in any given time. If you're in a high snowfall period, it might, or a high precipitation period of any type, it might lower that. So it's not quite 20 years, but his calculations were 20-year time that the water stays in the lake. So the issue why it compounds is if you have a high nutrient load in the lake, but you've got a lot of water running through the lake, it kind of, for lack of a better term, flushes that out, right? So but that's not the case in Dutch Lake, where there is no known freshwater inputs like of regular streams. And I don't believe that there's a known outlet of the lake as well, but continuously flows. Having said that, there's probably springs underneath. There may be some outlets underneath the lake. It's hard to know that for sure, right? So Dr. Norden did that study for the Ministry of Environment, and I'm happy to share that with council if you want to see it. That was old data. It was for 1982. So his thoughts around reducing the eutrophication of the lake, I quite love that word, eutrophication of the lake, was through a combination of things. Reduce the nutrient loading going into the lake, and of course, the main way you do that is to have a sewage collection around the lake. Hugely expensive. Or to improve the refresh rate on the lake by introducing a freshwater source. His report suggested trying to figure out how to do a diversion of water from the Clearwater River into the lake. It's possible. It would be either a matter of pumping it. At one point, his report also suggested maybe figuring out some type of a flume system could work. Either one of those are going to be interesting from the engineering perspective and probably fairly pricey to do as well. So, expensive solutions. The other concern around the expensive solutions, and I guess this is more around the septic systems, is the property owners around that lake, they have functional septic systems. They're legal systems that were put in presumably with all the right permitting and everything else. So it would not be very probably not be very well accepted if we were to say, hey, guess what? Now we need to put in a new system and it's horrendously expensive and congratulations, you get to pay for it. So I think the only way we can come up with solutions is if we can find significant amount of grant funding. Similarly, as mentioned, the water diversion project, significant capital infrastructure, potentially large operating costs. So that's kind of where the fact base is. But how do we move forward on Dutch Lake Health? Like, where do we go? And it's like any complex technical problem, the most critical thing is to gather data. And at this point, the data gathering has not been happening. There's no systematic testing of water quality at Dutch Lake. Where I talked about we're going to do beach testing, that's not the same thing. What I'm talking about, the water quality testing, is typically done in the middle of the lake, and it's quite an involved process where you check the temperature, you check the O2 levels in the lake, the dissolved oxygen, and you do that starting at the surface in a couple of meter increments all the way down to the bottom. And there's special testing equipment. So that there has not been for years and years a comprehensive testing problem or testing protocol. Because of that, we don't really know what the trend line is. We don't know that the lake is getting worse. Anecdotally, we hear about a tough season like this year, where it certainly seemed to be a bad year from a turnover perspective. But if you don't know the actual science behind it, is it just an anomaly year, or is it a trend of something that's getting worse? And again, we don't have that information. So staff met with representatives from the Ministry of Environment and the BC Lake Stewardship Society, and they confirmed a few points. First, and it was a little disappointing to hear, but they confirmed that the province is not going to step in and manage lake health issues at Dutch Lake. They're just not going to do it. BC is fortunate to have over 20,000 lakes and 750,000 kilometers of rivers and streams to manage. Dutch Lake is not their priority. And the ministry folks we met with said very clearly, if there's not a local initiative to drive this forward, the ministry probably will not engage. And who knows what the result will be there. Their highest priority recommendation is that we start measuring water quality on a regular basis using the BC Lake Stewardship Monitoring Program. Suggested starting at a level 1 testing program, which involves taking at least 12 samples yearly. They actually recommend doing weekly tests during the ice-free period. The database of test results will start to provide an idea of where the lake is trending. The water is tested with this level 1 testing, is tested for clarity, temperature, various depths, and dissolved oxygen levels. If we engage in that, and our staff recommendation is that we do, the MOE will provide some of that testing equipment, and the knowledge and the expertise show us how to operate it and how to make sure we take the test consistently. But it'll be up to the district to conduct the testing, and which needs to be conducted at regular intervals at the same point in the lake, so it's truly comparative numbers. And that person obviously will need to have access to a boat. They also suggest that in some locations with lake issues that a Friends of the Lake Society gets formed. And sometimes, if there's interest in that, could provide some volunteer resources to help with testing, or potentially be useful to future grant applications if there's a community group also engaged and it's not just the district. I would suggest that whether we form that Friends of the Lake Society, or whether, I shouldn't say we form, whether one forms kind of organically or not, I think we still need to do the right thing. The district needs to do the right thing around the water test in particular. They also suggested, the Ministry of Environment folks, that we really need to consider a science-based lake health program. So don't just look at one bit, the beach or the yellow iris, but look at the overall lake and say, what can we do to ensure that the lake health, A, we recognize where it's at, we monitor it, we see where the trend lines are going, but then B, we start with an educated approach of how to actually improve the situation. So that was their suggestion. That could involve more rigorous water testing into the future. So where does that leave us as a district? Here, so from a staff suggestion would be, because we like using the word phase, we got it in 3 phases here. So phase 1, we're suggesting that for this year we engage in level 1 water testing. This is the low cost. It's probably going to be probably be less than $5,000 per year. We also recommend that we take funding used or that was allocated over to the Yellow Flag Iris project, which is obviously a Dutch Lake Health project, and we allocate that funding to start our water testing program. What we're also suggesting is for phase 2, which would be for next year, is complete level 3 water testing. And level 3 water testing gets more to the chemical analysis of the water. And the chemical analysis is trying to determine if the nitrogen levels, the phosphorus levels, the salt levels, what those are at, and how they've changed since our report from 1982, because that was studied at that point in time. Also, if we engage at that higher level, we could give the previous report to the consultant and we could say, okay, we have some recommendations around sewer, water, and possible in-lake treatments to try to reduce the chemical load. Could you provide us the latest recommendations on these so we understand what current science is? That old report is from 1982, over 40 years old. It was well done, but presumably things have changed a little bit since then. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to the author of the report at all. And what staff is suggesting is that we look at that as a discrete project of bringing in a consultant to review the lake health. So that consultant, starting with our existing science and where we're at, could determine what the right plan is for testing and what the right actions are for moving forward. And then that, of course, would come back to council before the contract was ever issued for approval, budget allocations, and whatnot. And then the final step beyond that would be to develop a lake and watershed management plan. So feasibility and design and costing for any projects, what are recommended. And then a plan also to go out and look for grant funding to achieve that. I don't believe we can be successful trying to find grant funding unless we have the data that proves, hey, if we don't get this grant, this lake is in significant health concerns. So I think the data is a really important place to start with. And it also is a recognition of the fact that without grants, we as a council and as a district probably don't have the financial wherewithal to pull off some of these big projects, right? So that's kind of the steps that we're at. So I guess to recap, the beach stuff testing is immediate. We're starting up. The lake health issue, we want to start level 1 testing at a low cost just to start to build that database. And then anything beyond that comes back to council for ratification. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Bratton?
Do we need to make a motion to okay that today?
So we'll just...
Thank you. The motion around the lake testing regarded to the lake health issue, I think that would be useful. And the suggestion was that we take that funding from the pot of funds we have for the Yellow Iris. And when we do our little strategic plan update later on, I'm going to talk about the Yellow Iris, and you'll see that there is excess funds in there for this year based on what our plans are.
Go ahead.
And I do thank you for putting that much effort into that. It shows that we're being proactive and that we do care about the health of people living here and need to use the lake. It's something interesting. That lake is extremely deep too. So these are all factors that are going to be taken into account. And has fisheries been contacted? I know you talked to the Minister of Environment. Is fisheries part of that concept?
Some of the local fisheries folks have been engaged, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think what we'll do is, when we get to the point of we're starting the lake testing, we'll have a meeting where we bring in all the engaged
Okay.
people and say, here's what our plan is. Here's where we think we're going ahead, and we'll give them a chance to have some input or participation. It would be great to find somebody who would pick up, a volunteer who could pick up the water testing component, right? That would be fabulous.
Yeah, and you weren't able to find the old information. I think it was around 2014. That never surfaced.
I'm sorry, I don't know which information.
Yeah.
So there was a council meeting held somewhere between 2012 and 2016, probably. It would have been at a Parks and Rec meeting. We don't seem to have the years between 2012 and 2015 on iCompass, so maybe there's some background to it. We had a really extensive presentation that likely elaborated on the study that you've brought forward. And what it did is it showed us an overlay of the lake so that there was some visuals, and it was sort of a second phase of that study. And what we saw at that point in time is that we needed to focus on the septic systems around the lake for lake health. So it was almost a bridge. And I mean, at the time, we didn't record meetings, so I don't even know if there's a record of the presentation or who the person was, but it tied into the first arrival of discussion about the yellow iris in Dutch Lake as well. So it was all around that time, which I think also fed into the discussions about Rotary wanting to put in a fountain
A fountain, yes.
at Dutch Lake, as well as a 200 amphitheater with conference center. Just kidding.
You're not.
But I almost wonder, because I remember we were all sitting around the table, and some of the lake owners, especially the commercial properties, went, "Oh, look," and they could see sort of that impact. And so here we are, 10 years later. Where has that changed, and how has it progressed? And I really like the way that you're thinking is that if we can bring forward all the data, does this support the grant for our application for the sewer system to reach down into this part of town? And I think if we could develop that, it would be really healthy, because I think we've got 3 or 4 businesses on that lake. So anyway, that's the report that Councillor Bratton's referring to. It was 2012 to 2015, somewhere in there.
Any further questions, Councillor Matheson?
Yes, I remember that, something about that report, because we were living on Harvey at the time, and we were approached about running sewer around there for that very reason. And I remember looking at the map, and it was a little concerning. And I know that there's a lot of people in the community right now that are very concerned about the lake. I have been for 20 years that I've lived here, watching the change in the water levels and the iris. It's been spreading and taking over the lake. There's been various discussions. I think Rotary at one time wanted to put a fountain in there to aerate it. So there is a lot of community concern about it. I'm a firm believer in getting the science nailed down and not panicking about anything at this point, but we need the data.
Getting the data.
And then we can make some informed decisions about where we go from there. I think there's potential for developing this into a bigger project at some point and getting support from various funding agencies. But I think we definitely need that data to begin with. We're barking up the tree for not. So I'm fully in support of moving forward with doing any data that's needed and required. And I think the community would be very much behind us.
Councillor Bratton.
I'd just like to comment too, just because I was talking to fisheries, and just because we mentioned it twice now about Rotary wanting to put a fountain, that absolutely can't happen in there, because the bottom of the lake is dead and you don't want to bring that to the top. So that was shot down because it's not a good option. So just in case people thought we were suggesting that, we'll wait for the science and then what they suggest to us.
Any further questions? Councillor Sim?
Just going back to the fact that the Friends of the Lake, at what point in time do you see that being implemented? Because it's a really good idea. We've had lots of people, and it would be good to get their historical knowledge.
Thank you. Through the chair, I believe the logical time is once we start to measure and people know what's going on. I think it's going to generate some discussion, right? There's a lot of people concerned about the lake health, and a Friends of the Lake, or really a Friends of anything kind of organization, can be quite a strong advocate voice, and hopefully get the community engaged as well. So it's not just the one group, but get the word out there, right? And when we talk later on in the meeting about yellow flag iris, it's an area we could use a group advocating for how do we deal with this, given that we got some property owners who refuse to deal with it on their property, or they like the decorative aspects of it, or for whatever reason they don't want it to be dealt with, right? So there's definitely value in having that community group together, and I think sooner than later is better, right? But people will need to see that we're starting to at least monitor what's going on and try to understand the picture better. If it's just we start a friends group and we don't really do much action, then those groups kind of die away fairly quickly.
And maybe perhaps building that engagement, because there is sometimes a concern that you go so far into the studies and so far into this that then you ruin the recreation aspect, and you haven't brought enough people along in the process, and it's too fast to pull the trigger. So I really like your slow and more measured approach, and maybe we wait and see what the first testing results are before we embark on something, because at least then we'll have a clearer picture and not just speculation. So I wonder if maybe we could bring this back to the next meeting, and then make some more concrete steps.
And along those lines, I actually think a bit of not really a press release, but an information release onto our website about what's going on with the lake, all of the areas, the beach testing, the overall water quality concerns, the yellow flag iris. If people are looking for information, we should be providing it, right? So I think it might be useful, and it might start to build that interest, like you said.
Yeah, and again, it's building the interest and not presenting ourselves as over-regulating too quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
And that is one of the concerns, right?
Yep, that's right. And so slow and steady, know what we're doing, and this is probably Clearwater's most prized aspect, and to treat that carefully, respectfully, and gently. There's a lot of people in this town who care.
Councillor Matheson.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Sim. I mean, this lake is our jewel. Without it, we've lost our identity. I was wondering if it could be formed as part of the official community plan, as one of the concerns in there for sure. I think that's something that should be built on. I mean, we're looking at getting a vibe, a town center, and really that lake is key to who we are. So I think that should become a priority as far as planning and long-term vision.
Anything else? So do we need a recommendation for that? For the health one?
Thank you. I will take a recommendation around the water testing, going to a level 1 water testing,
Level 1.
and we'll report back after it's going about how the process is working and stuff. But a recommendation around that, and I really like the recommendation from Councillor Matheson about referring it to the OCP process. I think it makes sense. It's really a critical piece of the community, right?
I'll make that motion.
Is that 2 motions or 1 motion?
One glorious large motion.
One glorious large motion. Okay, Councillor Matheson moved that. Seconder, Councillor Bratton. Questions? Okay, go ahead.
With the testing, when
No, you can't do staff at this point. Well, between us, discussion is what I meant.
discussion. Okay,
Sorry. Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, so we're moving on. Thank you. So we're going to be moving into committee of the whole. So I have a recommendation that council resolve into committee of the whole. Councillor Bratton, seconder? Bratton, Matheson, sorry. Yeah, all those in favor? All right, so now we're in the committee meeting and we're moving on to Community Grants Policy Workshop. Ms. Clausen.
Good afternoon, Council. Today I would like to present the Community Grants Workshop. And just before we start into reviewing the draft framework, I was just going to make a few comments. Council uses three major tools to make sound decisions. They are bylaws, resolutions, and policies, and all of these are adopted by Council. So in this workshop, staff is requesting Council to provide direction in the development of a new community grant policy. The current grant and aid policy was written in 2008 and updated in 2019. In this new policy, staff is looking to include improved governance practices, provide greater flexibility, and perhaps provide greater or improved clarity on intergovernment grants. These types of improvement will modernize the policy to reflect current community needs, support fair and transparent decisions, and ensure public funds are managed responsibly and effectively. Some of the governance principles to consider in this policy is transparency, accountability, fair, and consistency. Building language that corresponds to Council's strategic plan, aligns a policy with Council's plan while ensuring that the policy is legislatively sound. Flexibility is an important factor when building a policy, including language that is based on principles and guidelines that serves as a framework for decision-making and allows the policy to be more effective and efficient. Staff has researched several local government policies. Of those, 3 use charitable foundations to distribute those funds. One had a strategic focus, particularly to specific social issues, and the remainder used methods of distribution similar to the district. All the policies have language around intergovernmental funding. Most of the language that strictly prohibits grant funding to other levels of government. However, staff has used a language in paragraph 4.9 as we go through, we'll have a look, that considers a fair approach to intergovernment funding. Staff has provided Council with reference material in their package. This material consists of current district grant and aid policy and an additional 3 policies, just for an example for Council's reference only. Staff will use the new policy to administer the grant and aid program for 2025, which will likely begin in September. Pages 70 to 79 is the initial draft of the community grant policy framework. This is meant to provide Council with the beginnings of a policy framework with some suggested policy language. Staff is looking for direction in each of the areas to be able to move forward. To start, the name of the policy typically has been grant and aid. However, as we move forward, staff was just wondering if Council would like to put the word community into the name of the program. It can, I've seen different naming conventions there. And as we go through the draft policy framework, staff is looking for consensus of Council with any additions, changes, or deletions. Staff will take those consensus points and update the draft policy. So moving forward, let's all turn to page 70, where we can start looking at the grant and aid policy. Or let's just turn to 72. So it's for discussion. We can start with the purpose, or we could start with the objectives and come back to the purpose. How would Council like to proceed?
Council?
I kind of like starting with the objectives and then working backwards a little bit there.
Okay. So the objectives in section 2, and again, the blue section is just a narrative that would likely not be part of the policy. So the objectives, that is generally a framework that staff has included in this policy, and council is free to include other objectives or eliminate them. But good governance, strategic alignment, community enhancement, organizational support, and financial stewardship are the objectives that staff has provided as a framework. However, if council wishes to remove, add, feel free.
Go ahead.
Quick question about 2.2, this strategic alignment with these funds. Would that restrict only to community-based events that are within the community?
Further on, we said community-based events as well as a Wells Gray country like area, yeah. So the larger area as well.
Okay, thank you.
Why are we going outside the area? The District of Clearwater, though, I mean.
Some of these larger projects, if we happen to approve them, will be servicing a larger area
Okay.
as well. I wanted the policy to be flexible.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's up to council. If council wishes a lot of the policies had a very narrow, they would have to be within the District of Clearwater.
Yeah.
So would it be easier for me just to jump into the policy statements and then come back to the objectives, or is?
Sure,
Well,
go ahead.
so I think your objectives are fine. For me, my only inclusion would be to expand it to say community and social development, because community development to me also includes that social component.
So in 2.3, you would like to say community,
No, for the I'm at the objectives. So the objectives of the community grant policy are to provide a framework that enables council to allocate blah blah blah, supports community, community social and development, or social community development and social development. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Do you understand the reason why for that? Just so I'm clear, so it's not just adding a word.
I do, but do you
Okay.
want to?
Nope. I just want to make sure. I knew that.
What exactly do you mean by that? Because sometimes people think, oh, social is really kind of straying outside the bailiwick of a municipality. So what type of social do you mean?
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and that's why I asked the question. So for me, that social development is those social pillars. So your community is a reflection of its connection, and our connection is based on the social development of how we come together. And to me, that's really important because, and it's become a worldwide phenomena about the stretching and the moving away from one another. So the social development is how you cohesively operate as a community and how you rely on that as such a valuable asset. So to me, it's the social development, and social development could be investing in ways that we gather. Whereas community development might have some other more infrastructure components to it. So it's just, it's the piece.
Well, I'm glad you explained that because I thought it differently, because I'm thinking community, as you say, a larger infrastructure maybe, but social, more funding for organizations and their group, things that they do socially in the community. That's how I sort of took it.
Number one thing that we hear on the Canada Day barbecue, I love
Exactly,
this. It's so
yeah.
good to be together as a community. Oh, it's so like those are the comments we heed. That is what weaves us tighter. So in the event of any extraordinary event, it allows us to come together because we've already built that muscle of how we connect.
Yeah. Councillor Bratton?
Is that, I think most of our grant and aid are, probably 95% of it is social, is it not?
Well, but defining it.
Right.
So although it has, what Ms. Klassen's looking for is us to define it.
Gotcha.
So,
Can you give me a real world example? Like I'm in grade 3. I'm just missing the thread there somewhere.
Canoe Regatta, Canada Day. There might be placemaking that revolve around sort of social. Perhaps using the Sportsplex for a roller derby. Anytime we gather as a social and how we develop that inclusion. Even looking at the idea of 50 under 50. How do we bring people together to gather to connect?
Thank you. If I could just ask,
Go ahead.
and it's an
Yeah.
important point, right? The social aspect. So when you say social, it's more around events.
Or gatherings. Which,
Events, gathering, but not necessarily supporting, Interior Health has a program for this and let's put some money into this, or put, it's not getting into the medical realms or the,
No.
or the other, some of the social welfare realm. It's, okay.
truly, you could call it community connection, but to me that's social.
Yeah,
It's where we bump shoulders and come together.
Councillor Bratton?
We have donated to the food bank before, but that's kind of this, so that's where we get in the weeds? No?
No?
Okay.
Because that's the community development.
Well, I mean, I'm for that. I
No,
support
that is community
I-
development.
Okay.
So that's
So
why it's
for
both in
definite.
here. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, we don't have to spend more time on it, but it's just a word.
But a word with a lot of meaning. A word with a lot of meaning behind it.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to number 4, policies. So items 4 through to 4.1 to 4.4. We may have seen these before, so I'll just read through them. Perhaps that'll.
Well, we've read them. You
You've
don't
read
have
them?
to.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
good.
Okay, a lot of those are legislatively developed.
So there was a couple of things that I wondered about how we would include it and if it is in policy. One, we are a small community, and I find that if the purpose is to maybe help bump up like a good idea, for example, people are maybe not thinking about that for a November 30th deadline. So is it possible to look at this as having 2 intake streams?
So we have something related to that.
Okay.
Further in.
So if the late application was not, something has come up and it was not anticipated before, then we would accept that application. That's what I've written in here.
I saw that.
Rather than having 2 streams, which is highly administrative.
I guess what I'm trying to capture is that there's so many things that when people come and they come together, we're just grassroots people. Like we're super basic and we have good ideas. And I think that this is part of that fund is maybe the council would support this idea. And it becomes that seed money, so it eventually takes off. But how do we foster that? And I appreciate that it doesn't want to be the administrative burden, but how do we foster that to get some good ideas going? Because otherwise the district becomes the catch-all to do everything. But a granting program actually gives seed money to help other people take responsibility for elements of community growth.
It would be similar to other granting programs. Other granting programs, you can't have a good idea and then just go and apply for a grant. You have to follow their schedule and their timelines.
I understand that, and I'm trying to establish a timeline that works for our community given where we're at and how we're trying to develop.
So if we want 2 streams, we can just let us know how you want it to put it into policy.
is just throwing it out there for discussion. We've heard the fact that it could be administratively burdensome, which is also not the intent. So
On my side, that I know that further in here, you have allowed for those extra ideas.
Exceptions, yeah.
Those exceptions that come up, and I like that idea, because then you just bring it forward to council, where we could discuss if we're going to fund it or not, right? We'll have,
Something could not be foreseen by the end of, let's just say November, and it comes up in July of the following year, and it's for September, and we can get it through, and it's something that council wishes to support, we would bring it to council.
yeah,
But if it's every year the same thing,
then they need to have it in for
yeah,
November
it'll,
30th.
yeah, council has the discretion to say no.
So I'll throw this out there. Would it actually help your office if it came in before? So let's say an October 30th as opposed to a November, December.
I think we would continue to process it one stream, like, because it has, the reason we do it when we do it, from a financial planning point of view, it goes into the budget.
And that's why I'm
council
asking-
approves it as a group, and it goes into the budget, and then the council can see the total value. So if you do one here and one there, you don't never see the total value when you're making decisions. So when you bring the whole package and you have 20 applicants, you can say, oh, that's a little bit more than what my budget is, or I have
That's
to
why
put
I'm
more in
I'm
my budget.
asking if October would be a better deadline as opposed to the December. What that also does, and maybe I'm incorrect in this assessment, but December, because people leave it to the last minute, like if I go back to all the dates of everybody who's gotten it in, it's very last minute to the wire. Christmas at that time becomes a bit nutty. There's lots of things that are ramping up, lots of different activities that are being put into motion. October, they've seen the summer season. There's a bit of a wind down. They can possibly get it in, think differently. It allows council to see what they're up against. It's not pushing so much on our financial crunch there.
So in October, we're doing our permissive tax exemptions?
Well, and I
same
think
time.
in my email I asked the same thing. Like, I'm curious about what and I'm going to call it the philanthropy of the district is with both of those. Like, how much is the district generating? Like, how much is
So permissive tax exemptions is a little bit of a different animal. It is, what happens when you grant a permissive tax exemption, you grant the property to be lower or zero. And so we have like $14 million in reduced land, which results in $120,000. So this is not just for the municipal portion of taxes, but it's for all the other taxes. So it's for the regional district, for the hospital, for the RCMP. So it becomes a significant dollar value. So it's $120,000.
to me that's to be factored in.
We did talk about it a little bit with the CEO. Should it be part of the same policy? But I think it's a little bit of a different policy, and a different organizations actually apply for, because they're landowners, right? So we have a policy on the permissive tax exemptions, but if it doesn't confuse the public to be applying for both.
No, but I wonder about it just for, knowledge around this table. So if I'm remembering correctly, we had grant and aid of about $35,000 for this budget. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Okay,
For
35.
the smaller grants. But there's some large grants that we are distributing for the X-ray machine, for the outdoor school, and for the lab equipment.
Right. But the 35,000 is coming out of
Taxation.
taxation. And so the 120 that you're also talking about, that brings us to $155,000
From taxation.
from taxation.
Yep.
So I'm looking at that, and what is that return on investment given we've got some significant other issues? So to me, it's why this is an important discussion is we are granting money that could otherwise be invested into some of our really important needs. So when we're stretching, that's why this conversation is important. and why I commented that it was going to be meaty, because there has to be a philosophy about how we want to move forward. And to me, they're the same. Like it's money that the taxation could be spent one way or the other.
Part of the questions in the application, could it be, I don't think it is, but could it be a question of, do they get a tax exemption?
Yes, some, I think I have in the form that they have to identify if they get a permissive tax exemption as well.
Yeah, you did.
Some local governments decide that they can have one or the other, but not both.
Yeah. That makes sense to me.
So we would put that in the form. At least I will draft it that way, and council can decide what they would like to see. One thing, I just want to highlight a few things. You'll see quite a few accountability clauses there. So 4.6 basically says if they fail to comply to the policy and any requests made by council, they could result in ineligibility for future grant funding. 4.7, we talk about records must be kept in a generally accepted accounting principles, and we reserve the right for auditors or the auditors to review the records. So this is not, in my intent, it was not to be the $500 and the $1,000 grants or grant in kind. It was if we were ever to go into a large or agreement with partners where we have large dollars and we suspect something might not be going the way we had planned it to go, it reserves the right for the district to have a look at the numbers in their books. 4.8, we talk about incomplete applications. This is chronic for the District of Clearwater applicants. And I'd really like to see applications that are complete.
October.
Well, yeah, we can decide if you would like October. We can, November or October, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Go ahead, Councillor Bratton.
Is there a reason for the $2,000 and the $500 that they need to fill out so much information? Would it be easier to streamline for the
Smaller apps.
the
It's
smaller
what
applicants?
our policy was at the time.
Right,
So,
for
yeah,
sure.
so, I mean, the district can decide how they want the applications. Like for smaller applications, maybe you don't need as much information, but for larger applications, you
For sure.
may want a little bit more information and financial statements. Bank statements are not financial statements.
So this is, and especially when it's chronic, that
Yep.
the information isn't coming anyways, for easeability for staff as well.
Yeah.
I would think it would make not streamlining, that's the wrong
It
word.
would make it would be a little bit easier.
Yeah,
And as a habit, I don't ask too many questions.
okay.
But in this policy, because I don't have any backing in the other policy to ask too many questions, I take what was accepted, and council sees everything that I have brought forward. However, if you want our applicants to be accountable and you would like a report at the end, you want to see that the money's been spent in a way that was intended.
Councillor Sim?
I think that Councillor Bratton's got a good idea about easing some of the requests for the smaller grant category, even if it's up to $2,500. I'll use the community Christmas Eve dinner. We actually don't bring in enough that the accountant basically returned all my stuff and said, you don't have to do any of it. In which case, in not being eligible, even though we're a society, we wouldn't qualify to come to the district. So I think that there's real value in just eliminating that and likely making life a lot easier for people looking up to $2,500.
I think that would make it a lot easier. The whole application just very streamlined, make it easier for everyone, including you. Yeah.
We can consider that. I'll put that as a,
Is $2,500 a good number, or
It says 5.
is up to 5? I don't know. You tell us.
so if you look at 7.1.5, so that's page 76. There I'm requesting if it exceeds 1,000. Now that number can change, or if council would like that to be 2,500. I just chose
Yeah,
a number.
I think at
to-
2,500, things have gotten so expensive.
Yeah,
It's
it's-
2,500. You don't do
Yeah, I
anything for
agree.
$1,000.
I agree.
Okay. So back to page 73, I just would like council to pay attention to 4.9. This is this is the intergovernment comment or paragraph that I put in there. It says the district will not fund applications for projects that are the sole responsibility of other levels of government, except in cases where there is a confirmed partnership. In such areas, funding from regional, provincial, or federal bodies must be demonstrated and must equal or exceeds the district's contribution. So more of a formal agreement between nonprofit organizations. The example that I provided to the CAO when he asked this question to me, he said, or I provided, if you have BC Housing Corporation, a nonprofit, and the district, one provides land, one provides the building, and the other one provides the management. So that is a formal agreement that could fall within this clause.
Okay, but that would only likely be eligible for large grants.
And that's exactly what I was intending for.
Right. So, and I also going through this because I'm not sure if we are actually at a place with a large grant yet. Like for me, this table is not full enough to be able to discuss that. But I think if we were to look at small grants or medium community-sized grants, so 2,500 and up to 5,000 or even 7,000, like do two small things. That larger discussion, that is a philosophy question. That says, where are we going? That is something really different than what we're looking at in terms of our $35,000 of what we've previously done for in-kind. I can handle that in this policy. The large grant, I think the more discussion about where we're going with that is.
When you're saying that, are you thinking having a completely different policy for the larger grant?
I'm just not prepared to decide on it because we haven't talked about its intention. We haven't talked about its visioning.
Exactly,
We haven't
yeah.
talked about anything. There's lots of things that have not been discussed and maybe can't be articulated in a policy without having those grassroots conversations.
Absolutely agree with you.
I mean, and to my other question that I had put in that email, we do have a line item that I think we're doing the X-ray machine out of, and that was there an answer for what it generated for interest on an annual basis?
Sorry, I wanted to pick up the first part of your double or triple barreled question. The question about should we be, for large grants, should that be a separate discussion? I don't think that's a bad idea while we have a full council here. And many of these rules and the policy rules still apply, and I believe it could still be a part of this policy. But let's think about that, and in particular, the whole comment around 4.9, which is things that are the responsibility of other levels of government, right?
That's
because
right.
that's the one who keeps coming up. It's the X-ray machine, it's the lab equipment, it's the request that we had from the Blackpool Fire Department. It's those ones keep coming up, and those are the contentious ones. And so we can hold that discussion off until we have that full council here to talk about it.
And I think it's a good one because for that one, some guiding principles seem to be in order, because otherwise there is the possibility where it becomes, that's a very full cookie jar. And I don't think that was ever been the intention of council to have that done. So what is our philosophy about it?
My intention when I drafted this framework was to have this policy encompass both the large and the small. And I think we can accommodate that in project grant criteria, the specific ones. So I agree that, you know, having a full council may be helpful, and the principles and the philosophy, then the conversation, we can put that in this document rather than having a completely separate document.
Yeah, it's just some guardrails. So
The interest for the Wells Grade Community Forest Reserve is what you're requesting. So the total balance right now as at, well, December 31st was $3.8 million. The average, so I'm just gonna go back a few years because in 2021, we only had $6,000 in interest. In 22, we had 52,000. In 23, we had 172. In 24, we had 192. And then this year, we're probably only getting, well, it would be 125 because the interest rates are falling. So I'm estimating over the last 3 years, in 25, 24, and 23, we're probably an average of 163.
all right. So the purpose of asking that question was because, and people around this table remember the $1 million that was given after the first forest fires, Kevin Kruger. And it was $1 million, and they kept the principal, and then they utilized the interest to fund other projects, so that it was the interest that funded what we could call the community grant, not necessarily out of taxation. And that's why I don't know if there's room for that to consider, or what your thoughts were on that.
I think that's a really good conversation, but this policy just is about the distribution. The funding for this policy is a budget conversation. And we can definitely go down that road.
Yeah, no, and I mean this.
And I think it's a great idea. It's just, I wanted
It's not a
to,
conversation that
But on that topic, though, I think you need to go back to what the purpose behind the grant was, right? Was it to create an endowment, such as you're suggesting, where you use the interest, which has a long-term community benefit without question, or was it to fund stuff? And I know with some of the provincial ones, what came down after the pandemic, it was to fund things. It wasn't to create an endowment. And in fact, some municipalities got in a little bit of trouble because, oh, let's put this in the bank and let's dole it out slowly over the years. That was never the intent. It was to fund community projects that had kind of stalled out during the pandemic, right? So I think with any of those, you need to look at what the intent was before you could say, let's put it into an endowment.
So going back to when I did the double, triple loaded question, and then I tacked on that question, is because they're actually all intertwined, because it goes into intention, purpose, and how we allocate it. So that's why it was actually a package question.
I understand that. When I was trying to put
I know.
the words to paper, I kept going to funding, and then I finally said to myself, what are we doing here? Like, we're distributing. This is an outward facing policy for the distribution of funds. The how we manage the budget on the other side is they're connected. But it's a decision we have to, or council has to decide how they want to use that.
For me, everything in here is great. I want to just see that large grant component taken out until we have a discussion. That's all I want at this point in time. The only other addition that I thought was important is we asked for the District of Clearwater be acknowledged in any publication. I do, but in our application is how much does it cost? So again, going back to the community Christmas Eve dinner, I actually say you're not going to get any recognition because it's too costly to do the recognition. Like once you add that up, it actually comes out of that funding. Now, if somebody asked me, how much do you need for me to be recognized? That is part of a formula. But to do up all those banners and to do all those things, those are costs. Or to do up the logos or to do the printing, there's a cost to that. And I think, is there a way to embed that? Because it's a reality if we're asking it.
So I think that they must acknowledge, I'll read it. Must acknowledge the support of the District of Clearwater in all communications, promotional materials, media coverage, and verbal mentions related. Maybe we can.
So even if we say,
decide-
please, the District of Clearwater would like to be mentioned, please factor this into your request. Because what a lot of people do is we ask for their project outline, we ask for their cost, but what's not in there when they itemize things is the acknowledgement piece. We don't talk about that, but that if that's what we're asking for, there's a cost.
And maybe we wordsmith that a bit so
Sure.
that it would be in any sponsorship acknowledgements done by the organization we ask to be recognized. So for a small event where they don't print out sponsorship acknowledgements, well, then we wouldn't be specifically recognized. But, or if they did it on a one big chart in the event, here's all the sponsors, well, put us on the chart. But I don't think it means that they have to do a special printout or a special sign saying, thanks to the district, right?
Yeah, it all depends on the event. It depends on sort of their grant. I just know that is a cost and it's increasing.
No
And I just, not everybody thinks about that. And then all of a sudden you get to the end of the project and you go, there's nothing left. And then you can't necessarily qualify in the way that you want to.
Sometimes I think about acknowledging the district is just coming to the meeting and saying, this is what we did, and thank you.
Yeah, and maybe that's the question. How do you see acknowledging the district? And it's just the how.
And I know many sponsorships that I had with the seniors group, if we got funding, they wanted to be recognized, but they're quite happy with me standing up on a podium and mentioning their name at every luncheon. You know, they didn't need something that was going to cost money.
And I think that was the intent of that.
Yeah. So
that-
I think that just needs to be made clear so people aren't thinking that they have to do something that's going to cost them money. And maybe even offering to send the logo so they can put it onto,
Yeah.
I don't know, something just to make sure that they don't think it's an extra cost.
All right.
Go ahead.
So just sort of for the monetary, how we break this down, I love your idea of including the word community, so it becomes community grants. I think that's important. I do like the 2,500, and maybe the second tier is up to 7,500 until we land on what that larger grant is. The in-kind, I could see bumping that up to $2,500. I look for something like the Sportsplex for a provincial championship. If we were to donate in-kind that ice, it tends to add up, but it's got great value. So $2,500 seems to maybe allow a little more flexibility, factoring in inflation, than just that $1,000. So up to.
All right. Any other comments that council has? I just want to draw attention to 4.10. And this is quite a broad statement, and it's meant to be that way, that council may consider
love that one.
applicants for nonprofit organizations that not adhere to this policy but have significant merit in terms of community value. So I don't know what that is. I can't provide an example at this point.
I have example written right down here for
Oh,
you to
good.
give me.
I actually
But
have an
it's
example.
meant to be an open, so that if something in the future would be brought to the table, council still can work within this framework of a policy and make a good decision.
The example would be, I think it was called the Wells Grey Community Riders. And when they came to council and they wanted to form a group around horse choreography would be,
That on July 1st.
yeah. And so it was a group and they got uniforms and they got funded and it was terrific. And then every Canada Day, they would actually do, they would have a show to sort of start it off. And it was great. But you know, they didn't have a lot of some of the criteria, but it matches exactly what you just said. It had great community value because people went out. You know, unfortunately, COVID saw the demise of that, but that was a great example, which is why I loved it in here.
Thank you, because I was trying to think how that would work, and that's exactly right.
So if I go to section 6, we talk about 3 distinct community grants. The small value grants, I had up to $5,000, and we're saying maybe $7,500?
2,500 for small.
Only 2,500?
For small. Because
2,500 so
and-
that they didn't have to do the big,
the larger one provide all the bank statements, because generally if you're only asking for 2,500, you might be a small organization like the one I gave the society example of, where no one would do our books.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be qualified. So 2,500 makes it streamlined and easy for you, and then up to 75. So I'm actually,
Yeah. So this one, I was thinking the max you could get in the community grants was $7,500. But if it's under $2,500, there would be a more streamlined approach to it.
much simpler, yeah.
anything over that, they'd have to have bank statements and all that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we have the project grants, and now these are larger scale grants, and I didn't put a dollar value on that at this time, and maybe we'll come back with another workshop.
I think we have to come back to that. I think it's also going to be really interesting to see what's going to be tied into the OCP. I think there's so much, and to me it's just, let's just hold steady at this point in time. We can always amend policies. That's the joy about them, right? But that one, I just think there really needs to be more discussion.
All right, and then we have the
But
in-kind.
can I interrupt? I'm sorry, because I know where you're thinking is like, well, what do we do about these
In the
classroom
meantime.
ones, right?
Yep.
But we still follow the policy that we have until we have that fulsome discussion. So we still have an operating model, right? Or we don't.
Well, our current policy doesn't really have any accountability, it doesn't really work for large scale projects.
And I think that's okay right now, because we don't have the philosophy.
And I think the natural outcome of that is, like the outdoor classroom, that's already a project was being approved. We know where the funding is going to go. That's not an issue. The issue will be any large project grant requests coming forward. We're gonna be telling anyone who brings it forward, you need to wait until we have our policy figured out, right? Because what we don't want to do is enter into new programs while we're working on a policy. Doesn't make sense.
No.
Existing ones, not an issue.
That's right. And it's not to delay, but it is to be thoughtful about the development. And that's it. And I just don't think we're going to be able to accomplish that today.
No, we need to have all of us here, I think.
All right, and then the final area is evaluations. Page 78. It's just some organizations or local governments, they evaluate based on certain criteria of the council. So perhaps you want to look at community need, potential, community benefit, innovative feasibility, etc. And those are just examples, and the percentages are just clearly examples
make
of
it
how it could work and evaluate it objectively when you're looking at the applications.
And this would be for projects that are funded.
No,
only.
it was intended for everything.
Okay.
Their projects, even if they're small amounts, may not have any community need, or they may be for a small group of people,
Okay, I see.
and it's not inclusive, or
And this section is actually kind of for council's benefit, so that if a grant doesn't meet the criteria that we've determined are important, then you can sit there and make a deliberation and say, you know what, it doesn't meet these criteria, we're not gonna give you that grant. There's projects what scored higher than that. And then you're not doing a personal judgment on the group. It may be a great group, but you know what? That grant application was a bit weak. Sorry, we're not gonna fund it this time. And I think it provides a little bit of more rigor for our process. I think it would be used more for internal scoring purposes, but they would need, I think it's fair anytime you have an evaluation based on a breakdown like this, that somewhere in the application process, it says, here's how these competing grants are gonna be evaluated. Here's what we're looking for. And whether those are the right percentages by the number or whether there's something else we need to consider, that's up to council. But it's fair if you're gonna evaluate something to tell them what the parameters are.
And then would they be informed of why they didn't get it, if they didn't get it? Like if it was there wasn't enough public access, would they be told that's the reason?
If there was something glaring like that, I think yes, because at the end of the day, you want groups to be able to say, hey, we didn't structure this quite right. Maybe we need to think about
Yeah.
improving this or this aspect to it, and then it'll be better for the community, right?
Yeah.
And if access is an issue, maybe then they work on that, on
I
fixing
like that idea.
So to me, it's not bad sharing it with the group. The downside with it is you don't want to turn it into, well, what about this? And have a back and forth over and over, right? Because then it just adds incredibly to the workload of Linda's team.
I just would like to say, I quite like having a scale system for me personally, because I'm never sure which one I need to look at more so that what box it ticks better than another one. So this helps me a lot. And then are we able to adjust this at all down the road? No. Like if we find that these don't actually fit how we're gauging?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's council's policy,
Okay.
and if it doesn't fit with the times, then, or council changes the strategic direction,
Right.
then they may want to change the evaluation.
Okay.
Along a similar line, somewhere in this lovely document, I can't point to it exactly right now, is if it's not complete,
Right.
or it's not done, or it doesn't, for some reason it just doesn't work, staff would then not bring that to council.
Right.
And again, that saves council from a group that you may dearly love the work that group does in the community, but the application just didn't work. It saves you from saying, okay, well, can we bend the rules a little bit to help this group out? And I think, again, it adds rigor to the process. People will know a better application is needed up front. And it allows you to say, no, it's a rules-driven process, right? It's a policy.
I honestly think that if people are coming to ask for taxpayer dollars, that they need to actually have a plan in place of what they're looking for and why. And if they can't actually get their, ducks in a row, even if they're brand new, that helps. That tells a big story right there.
So an example of that is if you're looking at 7.3.5 for in-kind, I've put there, in-kind support for fees and charges established by the district bylaws will not be granted on an ongoing basis. So organizations are expected to plan and adjust their budgets accordingly in the future. So I get it when the fees and charges have been changed and they didn't anticipate in their budget, etc. But I think on an ongoing basis, that probably isn't what the intent is of a grant and aid.
Exactly.
But now it's a community grant.
For a community grant. So council agrees that
I do like that much better than the
community
grant.
grant program? Okay.
And I like the fact that if they don't send in the full application, that you give them one phone call. Give them a chance to
Yeah.
fix it. If they don't, then that's on them.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, all right, do we have enough, you think? Yep.
Thank you. Anything?
I just want to say that was an extraordinary amount of work. And so when I
That
saw it on
was.
the agenda, and I really thought, and you want us to address it in one meeting?
Council did well.
Do you have a sense of where we're going with it? Like, you feel that you know
I have a
what?
few comments. There's things that I would have to complete, like definitions and things like that. We will put it on the agenda again to
Yes.
speak about the projects and maybe have a more fulsome discussion about the philosophy around it. Yep. We can do something.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll be moving on to the Clearwater Strategic Plan for 2025. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could if council could bear with me, there's a couple of items on this where it says on those items, verbal report to be given in this meeting. And if I could, on the second page of that report, there's the Fire Smart Initiative and the Fire Department Initial Attack. If I could move those up and talk about those first. So our fire chief, who's here on his day off, because he loves this process so much, if he could do a quick report on those, and then he could scoot out of here.
Okay.
Oh, he just wants to go to the hockey game.
No, my other son is up visiting from Surrey, so yeah. Okay, so a couple of things I'll talk about Fire Smart first. We've hired the 3 workers. Two were the previous ones we hired last year, and then the other one's a local university student. So they're all hired, they're oriented on all of our equipment, the assessment process, the home ignition zone one, and the critical infrastructure. They're working on doing assessments. They've done some mitigation work. They worked on at the SAR building, some at the high school, some at the fire station, did some chipping, and they're continuing on critical infrastructure, which is like this building, the schools, any of the water sites, the Centennial Hall, the hospital, wherever else. And then the green spaces that we've identified are all of our parks, so we can work in there and do some of that stuff. Any questions on that? That's kind of it.
Go ahead, Councilor Bratton.
Are they the ones doing the stuff around the high school, or is that their program that they're doing?
So that was a small joint project. So the Wells Creek Community Forest worked on that with the high school.
Okay.
And then our part on that was to do some education on Fire Smart for the kids on that May 3rd or 4th and 5th days. And we did some chipping.
Okay.
And then the rest of it, it was bigger than what we told them we would do for them. So there was a little bit of maybe a miscommunication there. So they've since hired a contractor to do it, right? We're not a commercial operation. That was never our intention on this. It was small projects that we can do and not large commercial operations, right? So, yeah. Okay, so then the IA program. So our IA truck is here, obviously, it's fully operational. Some things we had to do to it, decals, put a radio in it, get some adapters, so because the US has a different fire thread than BC does, so did that. Put all the required equipment on it per the BC Wildfires listing and ours. And we've been training on using it the last few Thursdays, and they've done some this week. The candidates, we've had about 17 candidates show interest in the program. We are taking 8 of them. So there was a few that were from out of town, thinking maybe it was a job or a full-time type thing, right? So our training is going to be on chainsaw safety, S100, that's a fire suppression course that BC Wildfire uses, communications, the equipment use, the driving it. And then our scenario dates, we're still looking at doing that, probably maybe this coming weekend or the following weekend. Hoping we should be operational for those crews by the end of the month. And then something that just came up yesterday that we've put together, we've been contacted by SIMP and their IA crews, so they're coming up on Thursday. We're gonna do a meet and greet, see what they have, see what we have, and then plan to do some joint training sessions through the summer if no one's busy and stuff like that, so. Yeah. That's the update on that, so. Oh, and, sorry, the tender refit is about 50% complete. We kind of put that on the, maybe not the back burner, but it wasn't as big of a priority as the IA truck and the crew and the rest of the stuff too, so. But it's moving forward as well too, so.
Great. Do you have anybody have any questions for Mike? No? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry. the rest of this, you've seen all of these items before. Do you want me to rip through these, or do you want to ask questions, or what's your preference? Oh, the one I did promise I would give a bit of an update to. There's a couple updates. Sorry, let me give those first. The yellow iris, which is at the top of the first page. So our plans are a bit smaller this year. We met with the contractor who does yellow iris removal and has done it for us in the past. And what she's recommending is a deadheading program for the yellow iris. So the deadheading is you pick the flowers off, and you can actually and they're coming in July. She's sending a crew in early July to do deadheading. What we want to do, though, is we want to get out there in the public very quickly this week to talk about the program so that people will understand what's going on. They last time they worked here, they met with a little bit of hostility from some landowners who didn't want them on their land. We don't want that. The contractor says, if someone's giving us grief, we'll back out. We won't even work on their land. Even though technically, if it's below the high water mark, it's not their land. It's a lake. So, and what we're trying to do when we go to the public with this, with the information, is help the public to understand they can make a difference just by deadheading this. They could go, if they are lakefront property owners, they could go in front of their property, deadhead the plants, and it doesn't kill the plants, but it stops the spread. So in the past, we've put down mats and other things and some removals to try to really knock the plants back. The consultant that we're working with, or not the consultant, the contractor we're working with, strongly supported our idea of doing a study of lake health first before going and doing a firm attack on the iris. He says sometimes people get, with the best intent, are doing things with pulling up plants and such, and says really the work they're doing is kind of spreading the problem by, unless they really know what they're doing, what parts of the plants to remove, it just comes back up again, right? And but deadheading is different. It's completely safe. They can, as long as the plants haven't gone to seed yet, they can, flowers pulled off, they can't seed, they don't spread. So that's the intent we're doing this year. There's a smaller contract going to start in July. If there is interested property owners in this, we're going to put out that we would ask that they contact us so that we'll know, hey, this property is good to go, and we can develop a map for the contractor before that crew comes in. And if people want to join in the efforts, that is fabulous. Or if there's a group who wants to join in the efforts, paddle boarders, canoers, whatever, that would be fabulous. And we will be happy to spread any information that needs to be done as far as how to help with that process.
Councillor Bratton. Oops. Sorry. She was first. Sorry.
One question, if you could ask the contractor. There's been black mats left. If you're looking at the beach on the right-hand side at the end there, through the trail, they're ugly. Like if they're not utilized, they're not fixing the problem anymore. Can they be removed?
So the mats are still on the ground?
It's like the heavy duty. So your weeds don't grow through. What do you call that?
Yeah. So, and the intent behind those, she said those are still a valid way of attacking the problem.
But they're a mess at the moment. Like they're not, I don't believe they're doing what they're supposed to.
And sometimes they leave them 2 to 3 years
Okay.
to really make sure that the ground underneath the plants are decimated, right? Because they can't go through those and then the plants eventually
They'll
die.
be assessing them, I'm guessing.
But when she's up here, or when that crew's up here, they can assess, we'll ask them specifically
Okay.
to take a look at those.
Yeah.
See what needs to be done. Right?
Councillor Matheson.
I think one of the groups you might want to contact on that lake is the Clearwater Paddling Society that's in town now.
I didn't know there was one.
They've been very active doing training on the lake and doing, I think it's every Wednesday evening, they do free paddling lessons for kayaking, and they're on the lake all the time. And I think they seem to be a very proactive group, so they may be an interesting group to talk to.
Councillor Sam.
So just in developing it, I'm just reading here that the yellow iris is considered an invasive species and is dangerous. And yes, Simpcw First Nation generally do not like invasive species. some information like many Indigenous communities prioritize the health of their traditional territories. And I just wonder what kind of a partner that they might be in this process, or maybe you know.
Thank you. And that's a really great conversation, because First Nations typically do not like the yellow flag iris. It is an invasive species. It's not native here, but they do like bulrushes. And in some cases, people confuse what they are, whereas bulrushes are part of the part of the natural environment and do have some indigenous uses, right? So we've had some conversations, and before we move further down on this, we will be talking specifically to SIMP about the issue. And I know there's been some conversations that some just kind of introductory conversations about we're thinking about a program. So it's clearly more conversation needs to be happening on that one.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think we've got that bulletin board up there. Is it still up there that talks about the yellow iris? But does it talk about why it's an invasive species? Like, I think that there's people who have been early alerters about this situation, but I think the community, there's a lot more education about why this is important, especially with the community conversation around lake health. So understanding all elements, and this would be a really good moment in time. Like,
along those lines, we've actually talked about putting together some poster boards with education for the Canada Day event, so that people could see, hey, it's right at the lake, and they can see here's some lake issues that we're dealing with.
yeah, even just like QR codes on different places, learn more about lake health and what we're doing. I
thought you were going to say QR code on a lily.
Scavenger hunt.
Okay, so another topic on here where I said I would give a verbal update emergency planning. So as council will recall, we hired a consulting firm to come in and do a review of our emergency planning this year. And that consulting firm has done that. So Red Dragon Consulting, who's a very well-known consulting firm in the emergency planning world, has come in. They reviewed our program. They talked with district staff, office staff, and then operations staff as well. We reviewed with the individuals what their roles are in the event that we have to set up an emergency operations center, what their roles are, what kind of training did they receive, what more other training could they do. And in addition, one of the issues with emergency operations centers is that often the people you plan on being there are on vacation somewhere, so they're not there. So the question is, what kind of roles could they be expecting to fill in on a reasonable basis? Perhaps something totally different than what they're trained for. So how do we get them ready for that? In addition, the contractor, Paul Edmonds, reviewed training, reviewed what our facilities look like, reviewed some of our high-risk assessments, and that's assessments based on all the major risk areas at the district. Obviously, the key ones are wildfire and flooding. Power outage has been a big one in the last few years as well. So the initial work has been done. He's just completing his final report at this point in time, and that final report includes a number of action items for staff. So it's been a good process. It's been good having someone come in and do that really wide-ranging look at emergency planning. So we'll deliver, once we get that final report back, we'll deliver some form of that to council. I'm not sure how detailed it'll be, but at least it'll be the key hitters, because it's a long report with lots of recommendations. Thank you. On the rest of this, I think that's all the ones we said would give a verbal update, so we are open to any questions that you would have. We will try to answer.
Councillor Bratton?
You have July on here for 37 East. What does that indicate?
Some of the dates on here are when they first made its way on, and they're not we don't update the date every time, because then the funky thing if we did is it would give council would say, hey, well, you just keep changing the dates on this. So we put the date on it so you'll know. This was when we first started talking about, and they'll give you a bit of a stick to poke us with and say, you said you're going to get this done by July. Why isn't it done yet?
Okay.
So we haven't been changing the dates, but
Okay.
that, and 37 East is part of the Dutch Lake corridor discussions that we've been having. The next phase in that one is that True Consulting is bringing back their report to council about here's what we heard. We did have that public meeting in the springtime. They'd be working on a number of options, so they're bringing back those options to council around here's the things we heard. Here's some areas where you could make some changes to that whole Dutch Lake corridor question, including the boat launch at 37 East.
Do we have a timeline of when they're bringing that back to us? Did they mention that? Is it two, like they're doing ROCP and they're doing this? Is that
Yeah.
two different things? Or?
Yeah, and it is actually, Gary talked about it a bit where he said we're going to try to put together some of the, where we've been out to the public talking, or whether in the results of some of that, or if there's more consultation required, we're going to put some of those events together. I think the consultation is mostly done on that, and I think the plan is to probably within the next quarter to bring that report back to council. I'd have to confirm that with him on when that's coming back. So sometime over the summer is my guess on when that's going to be. Our intent was to this year do the study and talk to people, and with the goal of building it into our next year's operating budget, any of the actual work to be done of major changes.
Does that mean the work does happen next year if it gets in the budget?
If it gets in the budget, of course the work will happen.
Okay. Sorry. Starting
Sorry,
to lose faith
sorry.
in this project.
I want to rephrase that. If it gets in the budget for next year, the intent will be to do the work next year.
Okay.
Any further questions? Councillor Sim.
So the next part on the agenda is actually the quarterly financial. What I found really interesting was how many of the financials tie into these projects. Is there ever a thought that we combine those two reports together?
The challenge with I think there is some synergy presenting them together, like on the same meeting. There's some synergy there. The challenge is that the strategic report is very forward looking, whereas the quarterly budget is what did we do in this last quarter and what have we done in the year. So they're kind of two different outlooks, but it makes sense to talk about them at the same time. And certainly there is some crossover where it's like we delayed this and it was in the budget and now that money's not being spent, right?
Yeah, and I think where I looked at it and noticing the overlap is to see that summary of projects that goes into the budget, then sees how that ties into the operational plan, see how far we are, yellow and green versus percentage of project done. It really creates quite a comprehensive overview of where we're going. It also shows how some projects need to drop off or why, and then how that rolls into a financial picture for next year as well and what to be prepared for. So for example, the tennis courts upgrades or whatever, I would almost like that to be on the bottom of this list. Like anything that's not started, I want it to be on the bottom, because then it classifies and draws to our attention about, is this really going to happen? Does it require money? Maybe it didn't get a grant for it. Like it just categorizes it different for attention. But the above ones, I love how it ties immediately into the budget, and we're watching it on two fronts.
Sorry, but you brought that question brought in my own mind. I was thinking about the focus area number 2, and we didn't talk about that, but we talked about it last time. The focus area number, we organized this list differently this time.
Yep.
We organized it by focus area. So the focus area ties back to the strategic plan. So if you're thinking to yourself, what are we doing around modernization and efficiency, which is number 4 on the list, you could say, we are looking at, that's not even a great example, looking at the yellow iris. And the reason the yellow iris fits under there, it's about investing in community assets. Well, I guess there's a bit of a connection with Dutch Lake is a community asset we need to invest in and get it done, right? So we tried to make those connections. Again, they're not always the strongest. Maybe they're open to a little interpretation. But that way, if you're wondering on this page what we're doing, you can follow through on this page and see what we're doing. The interesting point on that is there's a couple of strategic items on the strategic plan where there's no actions on the actual action plan. It's like, okay, how hard are we working on this if there's no action? But some of those is an explanation, adapting to provincial downloading, for example.
Oh,
There's no action
Yes, there
here,
is.
except maybe some of it where we're picking up spending where we shouldn't be.
well, I believe our new department is in response to that. Because it's not necessarily.
Sorry, I beg your pardon?
That's responding. I think I really like the sort of the different coding. I think as it continues to grow in that vein, it would be really interesting. And again, I always like it so that we can continue to educate ourselves and our public, is that we have the strategic priorities with each project underneath it. So it becomes really clear and easy. It's easy for the public to follow along. It ties into that financial planning. And what we're doing is we are slowly growing in our maturity about creating circles about why strategic plan, why budgeting, why operational plans are so important. All to build towards our report card at the end of a term.
Okay, anything further? There's a recommendation that the Committee of the Whole rise and report back to Council.
So moved.
Councillor Sim, seconded by Councillor Matheson. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, so we're moving on to water use. And that's you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I'll be delivering this report for Chad, who is away this week and was actually sick earlier this week. So so this is about water conservation and implementing our 4-stage approach to water conservation and allowing staff to determine when to implement each stage. So unfortunately for you folks, like, to get it on the record, I kind of need to read this a little bit verbatim because I'm not the expert on this topic. So staff have been working to develop a 4-stage conservation approach model after what's used in many other communities. The intent is to improve clarity and consistency in communicating water conservation measures to the public. As temperature rises, the district of Clearwater has experienced a notable increase in seasonal water use, and that is extremely correct. We have, once the hot weather hit this year, the water use just peaked. So the district's water consumption one day in July reached 7,267 cubic meters, or approximately 3,000 liters per person. And that was one day in June when the temperature was 29 degrees. In comparison, on June 20th, 2024, when the temperatures peaked 37 degrees, our water consumption was less than that, and significantly less on a per person basis. Those are really high numbers. And what it actually kicked into is staff went into a major leakage type of a investigation where we tried to find any leaks that we could find, and we were really concerned with that trend line. So while some of those increases may be due to leakage, Chad's modeling makes him feel that it may have just been attributable to excessive yard and water use rather than system loss. And there was some rationale around that. The water use on that first hot day, people planting gardens, people filling pools, sprinkling lawns, trying to get them greened up before summer, but really high flow rates. So I'm going to, rather than going through the numbers, since they're not really, those numbers are not my specialty, I would rather just talk about the stages of water conservation. So to better manage periods of elevated system use or extended drought, staff has recommended the following stage conservation plans. Stage 1 is conservation is encouraged, but we still have an adequate supply of water. So we go to, and where it's at, that's where we're at right now, which is odd even days of watering based on the address. New lawns may be watered daily. Once people have registered those new lawns, and hand watering of plants and washing of vehicles anytime. The watering on those days is 6 to 10 p.m. or 6 to 10 a.m.
PM.
6 to 10 a.m., 6 to 10 p.m. Sorry. That's where we're at right now. Stage 2 would be the next step, and that is when the supply starts to decline. So we notice we're not getting the input coming into our wells. And the point at that point, we would be reducing the watering time for 6 to 8 a.m. and 6 to 8 p.m. We wouldn't give exemptions. Hand watering limited to plants only, no car washing. Stage 3, which would be a severe drought, it's when our supply is under question, no lawns watering with sprinklers, but hand watering only for essential plant survival, but just 1 hour a day. No vehicle washing, no filling pools or pressure washing. And then stage 4, emergency conservation, critical supply level, all outdoor water use would be banned, including lawn and garden watering, water use limited to indoor essentials, and possible flow restrictions or rationing. At that point in time, of course, we'd send council out to encourage the community not to water. I'm just kidding. So the intent with this is that this would be applied by staff based on the supply of water. So as it starts to go down, we ramp up to a higher level of restrictions. And our goal around that is that by doing that, it takes out any political considerations possibly about how come I can't water more? We've got lots of water. And it turns it into a staff responsibility. That's how it's handled in most municipalities, where here's the numbers, we're going to go to this level of restriction. The recommendation that we would like for council to do is just that council approves implementing the new 4-stage approach to water conservation, and to allow staff to determine when to implement each stage. Thank you.
Any questions? I have one. How are you going to implement it? Yeah, just tell me how.
That will be done, the implementation, Madam Chair, will be done with our water utilities people who are monitoring that on a very regular basis. They're the ones who pointed out this year when we started to get into crisis mode on a few hot days where the consumption went way up. So they're in the best position to be able to say, hey, our wells are running way almost at capacity. We can't afford it anymore. We need to go to the next step down. So it's all about the production of water at the wells.
Okay. Councillor Bratton?
What currently happens, someone's watering at midnight till 6 a.m. Any complaints of those types of things happening?
Well, one of the weaknesses that we have with water management is we don't have a person whose responsibility it is to drive around the community. We do have a bylaw officer who works part-time, quite limited hours, that we could say, hey, take some tours through the community, especially when we get to drought times. Or potentially we could do that with other staff, say public works staff in particular, say drive around, see if people are following the rules, and if not, stop and talk to them. Help them to understand what our community needs are. And it's not so much to try to issue tickets or whatever, it's about to try to get to compliance,
Education.
right?
Educational portion.
You bet. So currently what happens, we don't have a good system for that. And if we do get reports from neighbors or someone else who sees this, we're happy to follow up on those.
Okay.
But it is a weakness when you don't have a person whose responsibility is to go check, right?
Okay. Councillor Matheson?
Yeah, I'm absolutely blown away by the numbers here.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, 1,000 liters even on a per person per day. I mean, I'm going away for 3 weeks if I use 50 liters. But I think one of the complacency issues that we have in this community is we've got a lake in the middle of the community, we've got 2 rivers flowing by us, and there's that misconception that we have water everywhere around us. And we have to realize that climate change is changing things, and I fully support a program like this that gives a good solid statement about water conservation here. It's just the fact of the new world, so I'm fully in favor of it.
Any further questions? Councillor Sim?
some of the other communities and barriers just implemented theirs, you know, the water restrictions or where we're at. Are we looking at bringing on board some visuals to help the community see where we're at?
This up.
That's a good idea.
Like level 1, level 2?
I don't think that's a bad idea. So you mean signage where the community can see it, or do you mean on our website or?
No, out in the community. So for example, Barrier's just done it. We are at this water level and it's 1, 2, 3, and 4.
You put a sign out at on the
Like on the
wall.
highway or something like that. So it advises people, it advises the traveling public, it advises people where we're at. So it's public communication to a situation we're trying to deal with.
I think that definitely bears some discussion on the staff side, because I think it's highly visible for people who maybe they're not checking the website or whatever, right? And if they drive
I know
past,
it's shocking, but I got to tell you, the district website is not always people's top 3. Just facetious. And I think Kamloops does a very good job with it as well. So I think people are becoming more and more familiar. So I think it helps to what you're saying is people think that we've got it, but now we're demonstrating a different reality.
Yeah.
The second thing is I'm not sure is when we put out our communication about this would be our step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I've just sent you, all of you, just a different chart that shows step 1, 2, 3, 4 in stages and then the categories. So it's a little bit easier for the user to see where it's at. So it just reverses it. But I think to be successful in our community, it is the ease of which we communicate how we're asking them to help us. Which is important. And then the last one is that Nanaimo actually puts on their graph of where their well is at, and they show the decreasing level. So again, it's a visual depiction. I don't know if that's maybe above where our community size is, but we do have a big narrative in this town. We've got lots of water around us. And so if we can show, here is, you know, where we're at, I wonder if it would help with community buy-in.
So we will take those comments back and think about them. I think the idea of some signage is great. And maybe we could put a QR code on that signage too.
Evan.
But I think that's a solid idea that needs to be considered, right? It's because you want something very visible. And with regards to the water consumption, and you're surprised, Councillor, at the level of it, that gets right back to the heart of that whole water metering question,
Yeah.
right? Why do you want it? It's not just about detecting leakage. It's about if people are consuming lots and lots of water for watering, they should be able to understand, here's the water that's getting consumed. And, oh, by the way, if I'm one of the ones using more, perhaps I should be paying more for it too, right?
Absolutely. I just saw what you just sent, Councillor Sim, and I like that. I like the different colors too. Makes things stand out better instead of just different shades of blue.
Well, what that does is the colors actually relates to the visual that can be on the
exactly.
highway, is we're a blue, darker blue, yellow, and an orange. So the entire time we're helping that constant informing people of where we're at. So it's just easy to relate to.
Oh, any further? So there's a recommendation.
so moved.
Sorry. Oh, so moved. Okay. Seconder? Councillor Bratton? All those in favor? Carried. So moving on to the financial update for March 31st. That would be Ms. Clausen.
Thank you. Today, we're presenting the financial update for Q1, January through to March. My report is on page 91 through to 95. A few comments. The objectives of the quarterly financials is to provide council with a financial update on operations and projects. It is a governance function that provides transparency and accountability. Looking at page 93 is a special project report. Those are large projects that are operating in nature. In the first quarter, the district has only spent about $24,000 on these projects. And there's 2 projects that have changed their project status, and I just want to notify or draw your attention to those. It's Project 3036, the public notification and evacuation route planning has been canceled. And 3037, the Park Drive lift station, has been suspended for the time being. The remaining projects are active, and I think we'll see a lot more spending in the next quarter for Q2. On page 94 is a capital project list. In the first quarter, the district only spent a whopping $9,000. Although the actual spending is very low, there was a lot of work done preparing for the initiating the capital projects in the first quarter. If I were to run this report today, we would have spent about $770,000. So because we have purchased some major items, and those major items are the Zamboni, the initial attack bush truck, the initial attack tender, the chipper. The tender 3 came in after this report was done, and the fire department new passenger vehicle has been paid for. So lots is going on, although it doesn't show in the first quarter of this report. On page 95, we have the operating report. If we were looking, if everybody were to be spending money equally throughout the whole, or collecting money and spending money equally through all the months, we would expect to be about 25%. So in the revenue side, you see that the sales and services are 24%, so that's right on the money of our budget. And you see that other revenues at 32% means we've collected a little bit more interest than we had anticipated, but interest rates are falling, so that could come in line by the end of the year. You see that we have no taxation dollars at this time because at March 25th, we have not run our property tax model at this point. We usually run that in May. So in Q2, you'll see all those full dollars reflected there. On the expenses side, again, we would have spent about 25% of our expenditures, mostly in labor and salaries and some materials. And again, if you look at something like the North Thompson Sportsplex, which is at 33% because they're busy in the first quarter of the year, they have a lot of expenses, and then they drop off through Q2 and Q3, and then they ramp up again. So that is my report for the first quarter financial update.
Any questions for Ms. Clausen? Seeing none, there is a recommendation.
So moved.
Seconder? Councillor Matheson, all those in favor? Carried. Moving on to the 2024 Summary of Financial Information. Ms. Clausen.
So the summary of financial information is prepared annually and needs to be remitted by June 30th. It's also known as a SOFI report. It must be available for public viewing for this current year and for the following 3 years. The SOFI report includes a financial statement that we have talked about before, but several additional statements and things that council may be interested in is a remuneration and expenses, which is on page 144. The schedule of payments, which is page 142 and 143, and the schedule of grants and contributions, which is on page 145. When we look at the resolution, I would like to make just a minor change, and I'll read it out to you. It's just to do with the acting mayor instead of the mayor, because the mayor is on vacation at the time. Okay. So it will read that council resolved to approve the 2024 summary of financial information as presented and hereby authorize the acting mayor and the director of finance to sign the attached statement of financial information prior to forwarding the SOFI to the ministry and posting for public information.
Any questions? Somebody like to, you move it? Okay, seconder, Councillor Sim. All those in favor? Carried. There's no bylaws. Goodness. No correspondence. Well, there is correspondence and information only. A letter from the city of Campbell River on resource communities advocacy, and a letter from the village of Chase on funding for public education. Anybody have any comments on them? Seeing none, moving on to public question and comment period. Is there any questions from the public? I guess adjournment's in order. Councillor Matheson, Councillor Bratton, all those in favor. Somebody needs to run.